Story 1. My boyfriend of 5 years refused to propose to me and humiliated me in front of his family. If the milk is free, why would I pay for the cow? Now go graze. Everyone laughed, and no one defended me. Before continuing the story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you won't miss more stories, and leave your like on the video. I didn't plan to cry. Not in front of them. Not in that room with the too bright chandelier and the smell of overcooked meat and perfume. But the truth is, I didn't cry. I smiled. That brittle, stretched lip kind of smile that hurts your cheeks more than your heart. And I sat there in that dining room chair in the middle of the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the casual cruelty. If the milk is free, he said, grinning so wide I could see the filling on his molar. Why would I pay for the cow? And then he looked at me, mock-pitying, eyes shining with the delight of being the center of attention. Now go graze. The table erupted. His father let out a bark of laughter. His aunt actually clapped. His sister covered her mouth like she couldn't believe it, but kept laughing anyway. And not one person, not one, said a word in my defense. I wasn't shocked. That was the worst part. I didn't gasp or freeze or feel a sting behind my eyes. I just sat still, holding my wine glass, fingers tight around the stem, watching their faces twist with amusement like I was a character in a sitcom and not a real person with real feelings. And in that strange silence inside my head, one thought rose above everything else. It's over. Not because he said something cruel, he'd said worse in private, though never quite so publicly dismissive. Not because they laughed. I'd given up expecting warmth from them years ago. No, it was because I finally saw it clearly. There was no ambiguity left to hide in. No way to explain it as a joke, or deflect with a smile, or tell myself he's just uncomfortable with big gestures. The fog had lifted. He'd never marry me. He didn't want to. He never had. And worse, he didn't respect me. Maybe he never had. I excused myself politely, said I needed the restroom. No one stopped me. Why would they? The joke had already passed. They'd already moved on to a debate about football and someone's third engagement. I walked down the hallway, past the wedding photos that lined their walls. All those smiling couples in matching outfits, eyes bright with promise. His cousin had just gotten married last spring. Big ceremony, live band, sparkler send-off. I helped plan it. I made the flower centerpieces by hand. I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection. There was lipstick on my teeth. I wiped it away and leaned in closer. Not to cry, just to look, to really see myself. My hair was too flat from the humidity, and I had a faint crease under my left eye from laughing too hard earlier in the day. He made me laugh then. He really did. He could be charming when he wanted to be, and funny, and soft in those private moments when no one else was around. But tonight wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a slip. It was a confession. A truth said aloud, cloaked in laughter. I stood there for a long time, so long that someone knocked, probably thinking I'd passed out or fallen in. I flushed the toilet out of habit and washed my hands just to do something with them. Then I walked back down the hall. I didn't rejoin the table. I told him I wasn't feeling well. He barely looked up from his plate. "You good to drive?" he asked, mouthful. I nodded. He nodded back. That was it. I didn't leave out of anger. That's important. I wasn't furious. I wasn't even hurt, not in the usual way. It felt more like recognition, like finally seeing something that had been there all along. There was no drama in it, no screaming, just a quiet kind of decision, final and absolute. I drove home in silence, the kind that feels like company. Our house, my house, was still dark when I arrived. He wouldn't be back for hours. He always stayed late when his family gathered. Too much wine to drive, he used to say, though by then, I suspected he just preferred being away from me. I didn't pour myself a drink, didn't sit on the couch with a blanket and spiral into self-pity. Instead, I went to the closet and pulled out a box I'd tucked away months earlier. Not full of memories, but of documents. Copies of the deed, mortgage statements, my pay stubs, emails from our realtor, all the paperwork that had my name and only my name on it. I hadn't started collecting them with any grand plan. It began after a conversation we'd had one night in the kitchen when I asked, carefully, gently, if he still saw marriage in our future. He laughed. Not in a mean way, just like the idea was mildly ridiculous. Why would we mess with something that's already working? That was his answer, like we were a wireless plan or a household appliance. After that night, I started noticing things differently. Every bill in my name, every holiday planned by me, every dinner, every grocery run, every repair call. I started keeping track, not obsessively, but with growing awareness, like a scientist slowly realizing the variables in an experiment. And now the experiment was complete. He'd provided the final data point tonight without even knowing. Now go graze. He said it out loud in front of everyone. It wasn't just the insult. It was the ease with which he said it, the pride in it, as if I'd given him nothing valuable, as if 5 years of my life were just material for a funny anecdote. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was upset, but because I didn't want to lose the clarity. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing the fall wouldn't hurt because I'd already been building wings. The next morning, I made coffee. I fed the dog. I sat at the kitchen table and made a list. Everything I would need to do, not to dramatically storm out, but to end it properly, completely on my terms. I'd been preparing without realizing it. Now I just needed to execute. And this time, I wouldn't say a word beforehand. There would be no fight, no negotiation, no final chance for him to make promises he'd never keep. He didn't believe I'd ever leave. That was his biggest mistake. Let him keep laughing. I'd already taken the first step out the door. He moved in 2 years after we started dating. That part always surprises people. They assume we lived together from the beginning. But no, he had his own place for a while. A studio apartment in a building with no elevator where the pipes rattled every time someone used the water upstairs. I used to joke that it sounded like a ghost was trying to escape from the walls. He complained about that place constantly, said it felt like a box with bad lighting and thin walls. I didn't mind it so much. It had character, stories to tell if you listened closely. But when my lease ended and I mentioned maybe looking for a bigger place, something with an actual yard, he said, "Let's do it together." I remember that day clearly. We were sitting in his car, parked outside a sandwich shop, half-eaten lunch on our laps. He said it like it was the most natural progression in the world, like we were already building a life and this was just the next logical step. We searched listings for weeks. Every Sunday, we drove through neighborhoods with signs out front, imagining our future behind each door. I was the one taking notes, scheduling viewings, asking about taxes and heating systems. He mostly commented on paint colors and whether the backyard was grill-worthy. When we finally found the house, a pale green ranch style with hardwood floors and a deck that caught the afternoon sun, I fell in love with it immediately. Felt safe, quiet. Something about the way the windows faced west made the living room glow in the evenings. We put in an offer the next day. Well, I did. He didn't qualify for the mortgage. That was the beginning of the first quiet compromise. I never told anyone, not even my closest friends. When people asked whose name the house was in, I'd smile and say ours because it felt easier than explaining, because I didn't want to make him feel diminished. He said he'd catch up later, that once he paid off his student loans and got a promotion at work, we'd refinance and add his name to the title. He said it with such confidence, like he genuinely believed it. So I believed it too. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. I told myself that repeatedly. He didn't have much to bring when he moved in. Just clothes, a few books, and a beat-up recliner that never made it past the garage. I bought most of the furniture. The couch, the dining table, the mattress, every dish, every towel, every light bulb. I picked it, paid for it, arranged it, and still I told myself it didn't matter. That those things were just objects. That love wasn't about who paid for what. We split groceries sometimes. Mostly I covered them. First, it was small things. He'd say, "Can you grab it this time? I left my card at home." Or, "I'll get it next week." But next week always came with a reason. And eventually, I stopped asking him to reimburse me. When the roof needed repairs, I paid. When the washing machine broke, I called the technician and covered the bill. When we needed a new water heater, he said, "Let me know what I owe you," but never followed up. There was always a logic behind it. He wasn't being deliberately negligent. He was figuring things out. His job was going through transitions. He was working on a side project. He was waiting for a bonus. I wanted to believe him. More than that, I wanted us to work. I grew up watching my mother manage everything. She handled the bills, the house, the kids, while my father worked late and expected dinner to be ready when he walked in. I told myself I wouldn't become her, that my relationship would be more equitable. But equity isn't about splitting receipts 50-50. It's about effort, mutual investment, the sense that you're both showing up with whatever you have, ready to build something together. What we had wasn't that. It looked like partnership on the surface, but underneath, the foundation was always tilted. I used to tell myself that love is about generosity, that if I just gave a little more time, a little more understanding, he'd eventually meet me halfway. But halfway kept moving. It was always just one step further than I could reach. He'd tell his friends that we'd bought a house together. He liked that phrase. He'd say it with pride. And I never corrected him because part of me wanted it to be true. Part of me was still waiting for the version of him that made promises in the car over half-eaten sandwiches. But time doesn't pause just because you're waiting for someone to catch up. The days kept moving forward, and I kept investing money, energy, care while he coasted on the assumption of balance. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles and wonder what would happen if I stopped compensating. If I just stopped covering the gaps. Would he notice? Would he step up? Or would he even stay? It wasn't resentment. Not yet. It was a quiet kind of erosion, like wind wearing down stone. You don't feel it happening. But one day you look down and realize the ground beneath your feet isn't solid anymore. He still talked about the future. Vacations we'd take, renovations we'd make, dogs we'd adopt. But when I mentioned things that required actual planning, marriage, shared finances, legal documents, he'd smile and say, "Let's not rush things." As if 5 years was a sprint. And the worst part? I accepted it. I smiled back. I made myself smaller so he could feel more comfortable. I rationalized, excused, deflected because admitting the truth felt too painful. I wasn't in a relationship with delayed commitment. I was in a one-sided arrangement, and I was the only one actually building anything at all. It's easy to lose track of how much you're carrying when you pick things up one at a time. A bill here, a late-night grocery run, an oil change appointment, tracking the property tax schedule, managing the insurance renewal, replacing the smoke detector batteries, ordering the new water filters, fixing the cabinet door that kept falling off its hinges, setting up the holiday decorations, then taking them down and storing them properly because no one else would. It all becomes background noise. Tasks you absorb without thinking. And every time I noticed something that needed doing, I did it automatically, quietly, like it was just part of the atmosphere of being in a relationship. Love expressed through logistics. He wasn't completely unhelpful. That's what made it harder to recognize the imbalance. He took out the trash. Sometimes he folded laundry. Sometimes he cooked, usually on weekends and always the same 3 meals. He played with the dog in the backyard and mowed the lawn when I reminded him. He liked saying we were partners, especially when other people were around, but what we had wasn't partnership. It was proximity. I was running a household, he was just living in it. The mortgage was in my name. So was the deed. So were all the utilities. Every payment came from my account. At the beginning, he offered to cover the internet and streaming subscriptions. Sounded fair. He called it his contribution. But as time passed, even that became inconsistent. Some months, I'd get an email saying the card on file was declined. I'd fix it without comment, chalking it up to oversight. We had a system for splitting groceries, one of those shared apps where you log receipts. I logged everything meticulously. He didn't. I reminded him gently. He'd say, "Oh, right, I'll catch up this weekend." He never did. When I bought new furniture, I called it ours. When I rearranged the living room, I asked for his opinion. When something broke, I asked if he wanted to help pick the replacement. He always said, "Whatever you think is best." At first, it felt supportive. After a while, it just felt like indifference. Our bedroom furniture, I bought all of it. The mattress, I paid in full. The curtains, the rugs, the bed frame, me. I told myself it didn't matter. that eventually it would all blur together under the label of ours. But there was no ours. Just mine and a person who existed inside it like a guest with permanent privileges. We had friends who'd visit and compliment the house. They'd say things like, "You two have done such a great job with this place." He'd smile proudly, as if he'd chosen the wall colors or installed the shelving in the pantry. I'd nod and say, "Thank you." He never gave me credit, not once, and I never asked for it. Not because I didn't want recognition, but because I was afraid of how empty the silence might sound if I did. Some nights I'd sit at the kitchen table and look around at everything I'd created. The houseplants thriving in their corners, the artwork on the walls, the soft lamp in the hallway that turned on at sunset thanks to a smart plug I'd installed myself. All the details I'd cared enough to curate, and I'd realize he could disappear tomorrow and not one thing in that space would bear his fingerprint. There was no evidence of his investment, only his presence. And yet, he acted like he belonged to it, like the house was an extension of his comfort. He'd tell his friends they could crash at his place. He called the backyard my grill zone. He'd invite people over without asking, then retreat to the bedroom while I cleaned, prepared snacks, and played hostess. He liked comfort. He liked convenience. He liked being taken care of. And God help me, I provided all of it. Not because I was weak or desperate, but because I thought that's what love looked like. I thought consistency would eventually earn commitment. Didn't. Whenever I brought up finances, he got uncomfortable. If I suggested combining our money or opening a joint account, he'd say, "That's a big step." When I asked if he wanted to discuss long-term planning, he'd joke that I was trying to turn us into a corporation. I once left a spreadsheet open on my laptop, accidentally, but maybe not really. It tracked every home expense from the past year: mortgage, repairs, insurance, maintenance, even cleaning supplies. I'd organized it by category and month. His name didn't appear once. He saw it. He said nothing. He wasn't cruel about any of this. That's what made it so confusing. He didn't yell or gaslight or manipulate in obvious ways. He just didn't step up. And somehow that was worse because it left me nothing clear to push against. No obvious fight to have. Just the slow suffocation of unspoken imbalance. There were moments I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that I was being petty, keeping mental ledgers, that this is just how relationships work. Someone always carries more, that someday we'd level out. But love shouldn't feel like bookkeeping. It shouldn't require you to maintain a mental inventory of fairness just to stay sane. And fairness, real fairness, isn't about 50-50 splits. It's about reciprocity. It's about care being mutual, about someone seeing your effort and matching it in their own way. He didn't see, or maybe he did and simply didn't care. I remember one night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking, if I disappeared tomorrow, what would actually change for him? He had no skin in the game, no real investment. Not emotional, not financial, not legal. He lived in a house that wasn't his, surrounded by furniture he didn't buy, eating food he didn't purchase, with a woman he had no intention of marrying. And I let him for years, not because I was naive, but because I wanted so desperately to be loved that I ignored every sign that I was just being used. I used to think he was just cautious about commitment, that maybe he needed more time, more security, more confidence in us before taking the next step. Some people do fear marriage. I understood that. I didn't want to pressure him. I told myself that love is patient. But there's a difference between being patient and being ignored. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being a partner and became a convenience. The first time I brought up getting married, it wasn't even a real conversation. It was just a quiet moment while folding laundry. When I said, almost casually, "Do you ever think about what our wedding would look like?" He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Why would I mess with perfection?" I laughed at the time. I thought it was sweet, charming, even. He had this way of making non-answers sound affectionate. I let it go. I let a lot of things go back then. Over the years, I asked again, maybe 4 or 5 times total. Always gently, always giving him space to be honest. And every time, he found a way to deflect. Let's wait until we're more financially stable. Let's enjoy things the way they are. Marriage doesn't really change anything anyway. It's just a piece of paper. Funny how people who call it just a piece of paper are always the ones who benefit from not signing it. I wasn't just asking for a wedding. I was asking for commitment, for recognition, for acknowledgement that I wasn't just a convenience in his life. But the more I tried to have those conversations, the more evasive he became. Whenever things got serious, he'd redirect. If I brought up practical matters like making sure he was on healthcare forms or emergency contact lists, he'd say, "Is this about the house again?" With that tone, like I was being transactional, as if I hadn't already funded everything in that house, from the foundation to the soap in the guest bathroom. And when I brought up adding his name to the deed, the promise he'd made when we bought the place, he'd wave it off. "Let's not complicate things," he'd say. He never actively pursued being added. That's what stuck with me. He never once showed genuine interest in making that change official. It was always on me to bring it up, on me to push for progress, on me to question why nothing ever moved forward. I started realizing that he wasn't afraid of commitment. He just didn't want to risk losing what he had. A life funded and organized by someone else without the burden of legal or financial responsibility. He enjoyed all the benefits of a committed relationship: stability, a beautiful home, companionship, someone who cared for him, without ever having to promise anything in return. And the moment I asked for more security, he acted like I was trying to trap him. The most telling moment came one night while we were watching a romantic comedy. Nothing too deep, just mindless entertainment. But the main character proposed at the end in front of all their friends. The audience in the movie applauded. I glanced over at him, curious about his reaction. He rolled his eyes. I asked what that was about. He said, "Public proposals are so manipulative." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. But inside, something clicked. That wasn't just about the movie. That was how he saw me. Every time I asked for clarity, for partnership, for a future, I wasn't trying to have a conversation. In his mind, I was trying to manipulate him. That's not love. That's entitlement wrapped in charm. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Changed how I heard everything. The casual way he'd say, "Let me know if you need anything from the store," like groceries magically appeared because of my paycheck. The way he'd say, "Don't stress about it," whenever a bill was due, because he wasn't the one paying it. The way he'd say, "It's your house," whenever something broke, but "our home," when guests were over. He wanted the illusion of a shared life without any of the structure that required effort or sacrifice. He was comfortable exactly where he was. And the idea of changing that, even in a way that honored the years we'd spent together, was simply inconvenient. I realized I had been asking the wrong question all along. It wasn't "why won't he propose?" It was "why would he?" He had no incentive to change anything. Cooked, cleaned. I paid the mortgage. I handled the emotional labor. I carried the weight, and in return, he gave me just enough affection, just enough attention, just enough vague future talk to keep me hoping. He wasn't malicious, but he was perfectly fine with me being unhappy as long as I stayed. And the truth was, I had stayed. I stayed through birthdays where I planned the dinner, bought the gift, and covered the bill. I stayed through holidays spent at his family's house, where I was always just the girlfriend, even after 5 years. I stayed through job changes, financial stress, medical scares, his health issues, not mine. And I always showed up, always gave. But he never once said, "Let's talk about what you need." Not once. The last time I brought up marriage, it wasn't even intentional. We were in the kitchen loading the dishwasher after dinner. I made an offhand comment about how we still hadn't figured out logistics for if we ever had kids, who'd handle school pickup, walk the dog during long days. He didn't laugh. He just said, "We don't need a contract to prove anything." And that was it. 5 years boiled down to, we don't need a contract. I went upstairs and sat in the bedroom, surrounded by the things I'd chosen, the furniture I'd paid for, the home I had built from scratch. And I realized I wasn't in love anymore. I wasn't even disappointed. I was done. He thought I was waiting for a ring. I wasn't. Not anymore. I was waiting for a reason to leave. And deep down, I think I knew he'd eventually give me one. By the time his words reached across that dinner table, "Now go graze," I had already done most of the mental work. The thing people never understand about leaving is that it doesn't start when you walk out the door. It starts months before, in moments no one notices. In quiet searches conducted after midnight. In files saved with names like miscellaneous documents or April records. In phone calls made during lunch breaks. In the way you stop unpacking all the groceries and instead start mentally calculating how many bags would fit in your car. He had no idea how much I'd already detached. Not just emotionally, practically. Started small. I quietly removed my name from subscriptions we both used, saying I wanted to streamline my accounts. I opened a separate savings account at a different bank. I told him it was for budgeting purposes. He barely looked up from his phone. Then I started reviewing my paperwork. I checked my credit report. I reread the deed carefully, line by line, making sure every document was clear about ownership. I gathered proof of purchase for furniture, every maintenance receipt, every improvement I'd funded. I built a paper trail, a wall of facts to protect me from any revisionist history. Later, there's a particular kind of power in preparing without warning. I started taking photos of the house, room by room, not for nostalgia, but for documentation. Where things were, what I owned, what I had paid for. I backed up important files. I changed passwords on accounts that were solely mine. I stopped sharing certain calendars. I started researching moving companies that offered discrete services. I remember sitting in my car one morning before work, listening to a podcast about strategic business exits, and I thought, this is the same principle. A relationship like ours was a contract in disguise. Only one of us had been honoring the terms. I met with a lawyer quietly. I didn't need to file anything dramatic. I just wanted information. I wanted to know what options I had if he tried to contest ownership of anything that wasn't his. The lawyer reviewed my documentation and said, "You're well protected. That's smart, not paranoid." I kept track of dates each time I tried to talk to him about our future. Each time he dismissed the conversation, each refusal to engage with fundamental questions about our life together. It wasn't petty record-keeping. It was documentation. So when the time came, I wouldn't question my memory. I wouldn't doubt myself. And then I started looking at apartments not far away. I didn't want to flee the city or hide. I just wanted a space that was mine again. A place untouched by shared compromises and unbalanced history. I found one. A one-bedroom near my office with clean lines, quiet neighbors, and tall windows that let in morning light. I toured it on a Saturday when he thought I was at the gym. The moment I stepped inside, I could breathe differently. I didn't sign the lease immediately. I waited, watched, measured how I felt each time he asked me to order takeout because he forgot his wallet, or when I paid for another repair bill while he nodded absently in the background, distracted by his phone. I tracked my growing resentment like monitoring a slow fever, and I realized it wasn't going down, so I signed. I chose a move-in date 3 weeks after his family's next dinner. I didn't plan it that way consciously, but maybe some part of me knew the facade would crack soon, that I was approaching the moment where I'd stop asking for something different and start acting like I deserved it. I arranged time off work, not to quit, but to request flexibility for personal transitions. My boss didn't ask for details. She just nodded and said, "About time." I didn't tell my friends yet. I wanted this to feel real before anyone else put their interpretation on it. The last thing I needed was someone asking, "Are you sure you're not overreacting?" I'd spent 5 years being unsure about my own feelings. I hired movers for early morning. I arranged a small storage unit. I scheduled utility transfers for everything in my name: gas, electricity, water, internet. I wrote out a detailed inventory of what I would take and what I would leave behind. I didn't want arguments later. I didn't want chaos. Every item was accounted for. Every decision was deliberate. Every step was documented. And then I waited. I waited for the final moment that would make staying impossible. I didn't know it would happen like that. That he would use a room full of his relatives to mock me publicly. That I'd become the punchline in my own life story. But when it happened, I didn't panic. I watched. I memorized every smirk, every careless glance around the table. I filed it away like the last piece of evidence I needed. By then, I already knew exactly what I would do the next morning. I'd wake up before dawn. I'd pack the final few bags I'd hidden under the bed. I'd let the movers in and walk them through the house, room by room. I'd take only what was legally and morally mine, down to the last fork. I'd change the locks. I'd leave a folder on the counter. Documents, receipts, a copy of the deed, an itemized list of everything left behind. He would come home to absence. Not a fight, not a dramatic note, just absence. I wouldn't block his number. I wanted him to call, to text, to realize what had happened. Not out of cruelty, but because he needed to understand what happens when someone you've taken for granted finally stops waiting. I didn't hate him. I still don't. But I hated what I had allowed myself to become. And I was done pretending I didn't see it. The morning after the dinner, I woke before my alarm. Not groggy or disoriented, just awake. The kind of clarity that doesn't leave room for dreams or doubt. I stared at the ceiling for a moment, then rolled out of bed and put both feet on the floor like I was stepping into something irreversible. He was still asleep, sprawled diagonally across the mattress, mouth slightly open, one arm hanging over the side like he didn't have a care in the world. That used to make me smile. Now it just looked like someone occupying space he'd never earned. I moved quietly, but not from guilt, from efficiency. The bags I'd packed days earlier were still hidden under the guest bed, zipped and ready. I took them out one by one, lined them by the front door. I folded the throw blankets from the couch, unplugged the lamp in the corner, emptied the drawer that held my chargers, notebooks, important papers. Everything I touched I had already decided on weeks ago. There was no hesitation. Should I leave this? No. It was all itemized. All mine. I didn't take a single thing that didn't belong to me. Not a sock, not a coffee mug. That was crucial. This wasn't revenge. This was resolution. The movers arrived at 6:45 a.m., exactly as scheduled. 2 men and a woman, polite and efficient. I greeted them with what probably looked more like exhaustion than a smile. Everything marked with blue tape comes with me, I said, showing them the simple map I'd drawn of the house. Every room had been categorized, every object sorted. The movers barely needed to ask questions. They moved like people accustomed to cleaning up after other people's endings. While they worked, I had the locks changed. I'd scheduled a locksmith for 7:30. He arrived early, probably used to these kinds of jobs. Didn't ask questions when I handed him the old keys and pointed to the door. By 8 o'clock, the house was mine in every legal sense. I left his belongings in the guest room, folded, organized, labeled clearly. I wasn't cruel. I didn't dump them in bags or hide anything out of spite. I wanted no reason for him to claim I'd been irrational or emotional. Every item he legitimately owned was waiting for him, untouched and accounted for. I left a folder on the kitchen counter. Inside were photocopies of the deed, mortgage statements, and the original purchase agreement. I included a letter, not an explanation or goodbye, just facts. A line-by-line list of what I'd taken, what I'd left, and contact information if he needed anything retrieved later. I signed it with my full name like a business transaction. I didn't leave my new address. At 9:12 a.m., I closed the front door behind me and walked to my car. The sun had just crested over the neighborhood rooftops. The street was quiet, except for the distant sound of someone starting their morning routine. My phone buzzed. A text from the leasing office at my new apartment. Keys were ready for pickup. I pulled out of the driveway for the last time, glanced once in the rearview mirror, and felt nothing. Not sadness, not relief, just completion. I didn't cry when I reached the new apartment. The space was smaller, simpler, still unfurnished, but it felt expansive in a way that surprised me, like a room where I could finally hear my own thoughts without interference. I placed my bags against the wall and sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, watching sunlight spill through the clean windows. Felt honest, plain, and warm and mine. He didn't call right away. That surprised me. I expected a text within the hour, some version of "Where are you?" or "What the hell is this?" But the silence stretched through the morning. I imagined him waking slowly, shuffling into the kitchen, expecting coffee and conversation, realizing something was off. No sounds, no bag by the door, no routine to fall into. I imagined the slow panic rising as the reality dawned. When he finally called that afternoon, I let it ring, then again, then a text. Where are you? What is this? Another call. Then, are you seriously doing this like a damn thief in the night? I turned the phone face down and opened a box labeled Kitchen Essentials. Started putting dishes away in my new cabinets. More texts followed over the next few hours. The tone shifted quickly. Confusion to annoyance to sarcasm, then indignation. The same man who told a room full of people that I was a cow not worth buying was now accusing me of being dramatic, of making things harder than they need to be. I didn't reply. I didn't owe him my attention anymore. Not my explanations, not my emotional labor. He didn't get to act confused now. I'd been communicating for years, just not in words he bothered to hear. By evening, the messages took a different turn. He started bargaining. We should talk. This doesn't feel like you. You're overreacting. Let's be adults about this. Let me explain. You don't just leave like this. But I did just leave. And it felt exactly like me. Maybe for the first time in years. That night, I made pasta in a borrowed pot, sat on the floor, drank water from a mason jar, and felt more satisfied than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up in a room where everything belonged to me, even the silence. I checked my phone. 5 missed calls, 1 voicemail. His voice, tired and smaller than usual, saying my name like it carried weight, asking me to just come home. But I was home, and I had no intention of going back. He didn't show up that first day, which half surprised me. I expected the kind of dramatic, wrinkled shirt confrontation he usually reserved for poor customer service or parking tickets. But he didn't come. Maybe he didn't know where to look. Maybe he was still convincing himself this was just anger, that I'd walk back through the door and laugh it off like all the other times I'd swallowed my needs to keep the peace. But I had nothing left to swallow. The silence only lasted 24 hours. The next evening, the messages turned frantic. You're not answering. Are you okay? Where the hell are you? This isn't funny anymore. You took things that aren't yours. That's theft. You realize that, right? That last one made me laugh out loud. In my little kitchen with its empty drawers and smell of fresh paint, I laughed so hard I had to sit down. I hadn't taken his things. I had taken my life back. By day 3, he started calling from different numbers. He even created a new email address as if I wouldn't recognize the tone. A mixture of guilt, false concern, and passive threats. My favorite was, I know you're probably going through something. I get it. Just don't do anything irreversible. We can fix this. As if I had broken something fragile and precious, not escaped from a system built entirely around my labor. Then came the calls to mutual friends. The indirect messages filtered through people who hadn't spoken to me in months, suddenly sliding into my inbox, saying, he's really worried. Maybe you should just meet him for closure. Closure was a word people used when they didn't want to admit there was nothing left to close. I didn't reply to them either. But the real unraveling didn't start until he went back to the house. I don't know exactly what he expected to find. Maybe an angry note, some trail of petty destruction, something he could use to play the victim. What he found instead was order, silence, a folder on the counter with documents he couldn't dispute, and a list of his belongings neatly accounted for. That's when the careful facade cracked. The tone of his texts changed completely. No more manipulation or false sweetness. You really think you can do this without consequences? You're not better than me. You just had better credit. You're a coward. A manipulative, heartless coward. Then silence again. Then the calls to his family began. Apparently, the same people who had laughed at his joke, the milk and cow and grazing, didn't find it quite so amusing once the fallout arrived at their doorstep. His sister reached out first. A single message. You could have at least warned us. Warned them of what? That I wasn't going to keep being their unpaid domestic help with no title, no respect, and no seat at their table? He must have spun them some version where I abandoned him, where I overreacted, where I left without warning. But they knew. All of them. They'd seen it in the way he spoke to me, the way he dismissed my words, the way he showed up empty-handed to every family event while I brought the dessert, the wine, and the polite smile that held everything together. They knew. They just didn't care until the house wasn't available for him to host in anymore. He went back a second time with his brother to collect the rest of his belongings. I wasn't there, obviously. I had arranged everything through a third-party company that verified the pickup. I left behind only what legally belonged to him: clothes, electronics, items with receipts in his name. Still, he tried to claim things that weren't his: the coffee table, the bedroom mirror, the wireless speakers, a floor lamp I'd bought with my first bonus 3 years earlier. When the company refused to release those items, he threatened legal action. They asked for proof of purchase. He had none. Then came the voicemail that showed me exactly who he really was. His voice, angrier this time, strained and righteous, rattled through the speaker like a rehearsed speech. "You made a huge mistake. You think this makes you look strong? It makes you look bitter, selfish. No one's going to side with you when they find out what you really did. You walked away from something good, from someone who loved you. But love without respect isn't love. It's convenience. It's habit." I deleted the message and turned off my phone for the rest of the day. That night, I took a walk through my new neighborhood. The air smelled like damp leaves and faint cigarette smoke. I passed a small park, quiet except for the sound of someone dribbling a basketball in the distance. No one knew me here. No one expected anything from me. For the first time in years, I wasn't performing a role. Not being the supportive girlfriend, or the one who holds it all together, or the reasonable one. I was just myself. I wasn't sad. I wasn't proud. I was free. He kept spiraling for weeks after that. More texts, empty threats, the occasional plea wrapped in anger. "Just talk to me. You owe me that much." But I didn't owe him anything. He'd had years to listen, years to meet me halfway, years to build something real together. And he chose comfort over commitment, convenience over growth. Now, for the first time, he was living with the consequences of his own choices. I wasn't the milk. I wasn't the cow. I wasn't grazing in anyone's pasture. I had been feeding him a complete life every single day. And now, finally, he was starving. He didn't stop trying, even after all the calls, emails, and failed property claims. Not after the locksmith or the legal silence. About a month after I left, a mutual acquaintance reached out. Someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. Someone who had always played neutral, floating between social circles like Switzerland in human form. She asked if I'd consider sitting down just once to talk. Not to reconcile, not to make up, just to clear the air. At first, I almost deleted the message, but something about the phrasing stuck with me. To set the record straight. That's exactly what she wrote. And maybe that's what I wanted, too. Not for closure, but for clarity. I agreed on my terms. Public place, neutral ground, mid-afternoon. I gave the time, the location, and the boundaries: 1 hour, one conversation, nothing more. He showed up 5 minutes late, wearing the same jacket he'd worn the night he made the joke. I noticed immediately. I wondered if it was intentional, an attempt to trigger something familiar, to rewind the clock. If it was, it didn't work. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just diminished. Like someone who hadn't been sleeping well, who had spent weeks realizing too late that he wasn't nearly as indispensable as he'd assumed. He didn't smile. He didn't start with small talk. He sat down across from me at the cafe table and leaned forward like he was expecting a fight. I didn't give him one. "I just want to understand," he said finally. "Why you had to make it so dramatic." That was his word. Dramatic. I didn't flinch. I had come prepared, not emotionally, but with documentation. I opened the folder I'd brought and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of everything. The mortgage, the title, all utilities in my name, receipts for furniture, services, maintenance, repairs, every expense categorized by date and amount. I had screenshots of texts where I'd offered to include him in financial decisions, to discuss balance, to share responsibility fairly. I didn't say a word while he looked through it. I just watched. He flipped through the pages slowly, slower than I expected. At one point, he looked up like he was about to argue, but the words died in his throat. There was nothing to dispute. Every line was documented. When he finally closed the folder, his expression had shifted. Less defensive, more confused. You really kept track of all this? I had to, I said, because I knew eventually you'd try to rewrite history. He leaned back, arms crossed. It wasn't that one-sided. I didn't respond immediately, just let the silence sit there between us until he had to squirm under it. You didn't think it was one-sided, I said, because it worked for you. He opened his mouth again, then shut it. For the first time, maybe ever, he didn't have a comeback ready. The conversation moved slowly after that. He asked questions that weren't really questions, statements wrapped in denial. I thought we were happy. You thought I was happy, I corrected. I didn't think you'd just disappear. I didn't disappear. I removed myself from an unbalanced situation. You could have talked to me first. I did. For 5 years. Every answer was calm, controlled, detached. I didn't need to raise my voice. The facts were louder than anything I could say. Eventually, he shifted tactics. You know, I loved you. No, I said. You loved what I provided. You loved the version of me that asked for nothing in return. That landed harder than I expected. He blinked, looked away. For a moment, I thought he might actually apologize. Not performatively, not to win points, but genuinely. But instead, he said, "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I felt something that might have been a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. Not a kind one. I humiliated you? I asked, leaning in slightly. You did that yourself. I didn't make the joke. I didn't laugh. I didn't call myself a cow, and too smart to pay. That was all you. I just decided not to stay in the pasture you put me in. He went quiet after that. Really quiet. The server came by. He didn't order anything. I paid for my coffee out of habit, not spite, and stood to leave. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. I left him sitting there with a folder full of proof and a silence full of consequences. The conversation hadn't been about healing. It had been about reflection, about setting the weight of truth down in the middle of the table and walking away from it lighter. Later that evening, I got a message from someone in his family. I don't know who gave them my number, but it wasn't hard to guess. The tone was accusatory. You blindsided him. You made him look like a fool. He made himself look like a fool. I saved the message, filed it with the rest. A reminder that some people confuse enabling with loyalty, that they'd rather defend a son, a brother, a friend, even when the evidence contradicts their story, than face uncomfortable truths about how little he actually contributed. But I wasn't interested in making anyone understand anymore. I had said what needed saying. And finally, I didn't care if they heard it. The pickup was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. He didn't want to go through the company I'd used before. He said it was too formal, like I was treating him like a stranger. I almost reminded him that strangers tend to treat each other with more basic respect than we had by the end. But I kept that observation to myself. No energy left for arguments that only existed to preserve his ego. Instead, I let him choose how it would happen within strict limits. I agreed to be present for the collection of his remaining belongings. A short final interaction, supervised, documented, 1 hour maximum. I wasn't nervous, just ready. There was a sense of ceremony to it, almost clinical, like returning keys to a landlord after moving out. Not sad, not angry, just complete. He arrived 10 minutes late, naturally. Same car, same posture. As if he thought maybe I'd soften when I saw him. Like the sight of his familiar hands in his pockets. His practiced slouch might trigger some old reflex of care. Didn't. I was past reflexes. I stood in the front hallway while he stepped inside. He looked around like a tourist visiting a place he used to know. His eyes moved slowly across the empty rooms. The couch was gone. The bookshelves were bare. Even the curtains had been replaced. He looked unsettled, like the house had already erased him. It had. I pointed toward the guest room where I had placed everything he still had any claim to. I had grouped it all together methodically, folded, boxed, labeled with his name. It looked impersonal, temporary, a life reduced to a few containers and bags. He didn't thank me. Instead, he wandered, peering into other rooms, almost as if hoping to find something I'd missed. He lingered near the bedroom door, glanced at the walls where we used to keep framed photos. The nail holes were still there. The frames were not. "This feels surreal," he said finally. I didn't respond. I had nothing left to narrate for him. He'd already written the ending himself. He opened a box marked personal items, then one labeled electronics. Then he got to the stack of smaller things. Bathroom supplies, kitchen gadgets, old charging cables he barely used. That's where the problem started. "Where's my Bluetooth speaker?" "Purchased by me," I replied. "Receipt in my name. It's not on the approved list." He looked at me like he expected me to cave to make an exception. I didn't blink. "And the cast iron skillet?" "Gift from my sister 3 years ago. Not yours." He scoffed. "You're really going to keep cookware like it's treasure?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm keeping what belongs to me." He went quiet again, but I could see the frustration building. Not because he actually cared about the speaker or the skillet, but because he was realizing how little of our shared space had ever actually belonged to him. Kept happening, one item after another. Things he assumed were his. Things he had used, touched, treated as communal property, denied. Not because I was being spiteful, but because they were never his to begin with. "You really documented everything," he muttered, flipping through the itemized list I had printed and attached to the final box. I didn't respond. He knew I had. That was the part he couldn't reconcile. That I had done this work, all of it, right down to the final inventory. That I had been prepared in ways he never thought necessary. He sat on the edge of the now bare guest bed and rubbed his jaw. "Feels like I don't have anything left." I didn't say it, but I thought it. "You never built anything to begin with." He looked up, eyes tired. "What am I supposed to do now?" It wasn't really a question. It was a confession. That's when I saw it fully. The hollow space behind all that bluster. The man who had drifted through 5 years of someone else's effort and now had nothing to show for it but bags of clothes and toiletries in Ziploc bags. He started asking about things he couldn't take. The wall-mounted TV, the dining chairs, the area rug in the living room. All of them were mine. I had invoices, credit card statements, email receipts. "I remember picking this rug out with you," he said. "Yes," I replied. "And then I paid for it. You said you'd send me your half. You never did." He stared at it for a long time. "It still feels like part of me." "It's not. Not anymore." He didn't argue further. I think deep down he knew. He just hadn't expected to see it laid out so plainly that, after years of talking like a co-owner, he was leaving with only what he'd brought in less, even. When the hour was up, I walked him to the door. He paused there, looking back one last time, like the house might say something on his behalf, but houses don't lie. They hold what you give them, and he'd given this one nothing. He picked up the last box and stepped outside. "Guess that's it," he said, forcing a half-smile. "It was always going to be," I said. "You just didn't want to believe it." He stood there a moment longer, as if waiting for a hug or a shared memory or maybe one last gift of understanding. I gave him nothing. I closed the door, locked it. On the other side, I heard the sound of cardboard scraping against the porch railing. A frustrated sigh, then footsteps, then silence. I walked back inside and looked around the empty rooms. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a space that had finally exhaled. The letter came 2 weeks later. Not from him. He'd stopped texting by then, at least directly. This was from a law office. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with a return address in a part of town I recognized immediately. His family's area. Established money, older influence. A name I didn't recognize printed in elegant script above the firm's logo. But I didn't need to know the lawyer's name to guess who had paid the retainer. Inside, the tone was almost comical in its formality. Legal jargon stacked on legal jargon. Sentences bloated with hereby and whereas, attempting to create weight out of air. They claimed shared occupancy rights, contributions in kind, and my personal favorite, implied co-ownership via extended domestic partnership. I laughed. It wasn't bitter, just tired. The kind of laugh you let out when you've already done all the homework and someone else is just now realizing you weren't bluffing. They were trying to establish grounds for a case. Not for actual ownership, but for leverage, hoping I'd be intimidated enough to compromise, to settle, to give back something that was never theirs to begin with. I read each page carefully, highlighted every phrase that attempted to twist my 5 years of investment into a shared achievement. Then I pulled up my files, the folder I had maintained meticulously. I printed copies, mortgage documents, utility bills, every receipt, screenshots of text messages where I'd offered to add him to the deed. His replies always evasive. Let's talk later. Not a good time. No rush, right? Messages where he acknowledged he hadn't paid me back for various expenses. Notes from our realtor clearly stating I was the sole applicant and qualified borrower. Then I called my lawyer. He wasn't surprised. Families like his always try this, he said, flipping through the threatening letter. They don't like losing face. They'll frame economic reality as injustice just to avoid admitting it was irresponsibility. I let him handle the response. It was short, precise, and legally airtight. A line-by-line rebuttal attached with all necessary documentation, including a signed declaration from me affirming that all cohabitation had been informal, uncontracted, and supported entirely by my income and assets. We sent it out that same week. I requested a delivery confirmation. Came back the next morning. After that, the tone shifted dramatically. They tried again, this time with less legal posturing and more emotional manipulation. Another letter, this one handwritten, from his mother. I recognized the heavy cursive, the scent of her floral perfume pressed into the paper. She said she was deeply saddened by how things had turned out, that a house isn't worth this much damage to relationships, and that family should come before paperwork. Family, as if I'd ever truly been part of theirs. I didn't respond. A few days later, another letter arrived, this one unsigned. No return address. A single sentence scrolled in messy pen across torn notebook paper. You'll regret this when you're old and alone. That one didn't make me laugh. Not because it hurt, but because it was so predictable. The oldest threat in the book. As if loneliness were the worst fate a woman could suffer. As if being partnered with someone who slowly drains you is preferable to sleeping peacefully in a room you pay for yourself. I kept the note, filed it with the rest. Let them accumulate like museum pieces. Evidence of what people become when you stop allowing them to feed off your silence. For a moment, I wondered if he'd try showing up at my door again. If he'd appear with some mixture of rage and desperation, demanding answers or access. But he never did. Maybe someone warned him. Maybe he finally understood what it meant to stand on legal ground with nothing solid beneath his feet. I never doubted the case would collapse. There was no legal standing, no history of financial contribution, no documented co-ownership, just entitlement dressed up in family letterhead and secondhand threats. The lawyer called 2 weeks after our response. It's done, he said. They've dropped everything. No counterarguments, no follow-up. Of course they did, I said. They never had a case, just a story. He paused, then added, if you ever need a restraining order filed, let me know. I've seen these situations turn bitter when the bluff fails completely. I thanked him and hung up. That night, I slept through the entire night for the first time in weeks. No pacing, no phone alerts, no rehearsed responses in my head for attacks that never came. Just quiet, clean, whole, undisturbed quiet. When people say it's over, they usually mean emotionally. But this was different. This was the end of their reach. No more paperwork. No more veiled threats. No more pretending their opinions had any bearing on my actual life. He and his family could spin whatever story they needed to protect their pride. I wouldn't hear it. I wouldn't correct it. Let them choke on their revised version of events. The truth didn't need defending anymore. It had already won. Selling the house wasn't an emotional decision. It was mathematical, cold, precise, liberating mathematics. I had equity. I had value. And for the first time in a long time, I was the only one who would benefit from it. The idea started quietly, almost like idle curiosity. I was scrolling through real estate listings one evening, not searching for anything specific, just observing market trends. Then I saw a similar house 3 blocks away. Same floor plan, smaller yard, slightly outdated kitchen, listed for almost $90,000 more than what I had paid 3 years earlier. I blinked, saved the link, started running numbers in my head. The market had shifted significantly in my favor, and I wasn't emotionally tethered to the space anymore. Every room I walked through now echoed with clean detachment. I'd already extracted the memories I wanted to keep. Everything else was just drywall and decisions. I called a realtor, someone I trusted, someone outside the circle he used to pull social favors from. We met the following week. She walked through the place slowly, taking notes and photos. "You've maintained this beautifully," she said. "Excellent natural light, clean lines, smart improvements. You'll get offers, quick ones." I told her I was ready to move fast. I didn't want to drag out the process. No elaborate staging, no emotional delays, just clear pricing and the right buyer. Within 4 days of listing, I had 5 offers, all above asking price. That's when it really hit me. How long I'd been sitting on something valuable, trapped in the belief that I couldn't move forward, that I had to stay and maintain and nurture a place that never truly gave back. I wasn't just selling a house. I was liquidating every sacrifice I'd made, every quiet night I'd held things together alone. The final sale closed within 30 days. Clean transaction, no complications, no interference from anyone. When the check cleared, I stared at the number in my account for a long time. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was mine completely, unquestionably mine. I didn't rush to spend it. I let it sit untouched for weeks, like a boundary I had drawn in the shape of a bank balance. Proof that something solid could come from years of imbalance. Then I started making lists. Not lists of things I needed, but things I had postponed. For years, I told myself certain purchases could wait. A weekend trip to the coast, a new laptop, a photography workshop, a real mattress that didn't feel like a compromise. I'd always prioritized joint expenses, things we might both use, things he might benefit from. Now, I thought only in singular terms. I booked a solo trip to a coastal town I'd bookmarked years ago, but never dared visit without him. I upgraded my workspace. I bought fresh linens, a pair of boots I used to admire through shop windows, and new cookware. Nothing extravagant, just mine. Every purchase felt deliberate, not indulgent, not impulsive, just corrective. I even started a small project I'd shelved indefinitely. Something I used to sketch ideas for in old notebooks when I thought I had spare time. I won't describe it in detail. Still growing, still fragile. But the point is, I made space for it again. Space I'd once filled with someone else's priorities and problems. People around me noticed changes. Coworkers said I seemed lighter. Friends invited me out more often. One of them, someone who used to avoid bringing their partner around when I was still with him, said, "You seem more yourself lately," and I was, not happier in some magical way, not dramatically transformed, just more present, more real, less edited for someone else's comfort. Freedom didn't look like champagne or revenge plots. It looked like grocery shopping without budgeting for someone else's expensive snacks, like sleeping diagonally across a bed that I had paid for, like knowing that no one was quietly draining my energy in the background while I slept. He tried reaching out again once more. An email this time, short, polite, carefully worded. He said he'd heard through mutual connections that I'd sold the house, that he hoped everything worked out well, that he was glad things had turned out okay for me, as if he'd been a neutral observer, as if he'd watched our relationship from the sidelines instead of living inside it. I didn't reply. What was there to say? That I was thriving despite his years of passive consumption? That I'd spent half a decade building a life he coasted through, and now I was finally building one for myself alone? No. The best response was no response at all. Let him imagine. Let him guess. Let him wonder. Let him sit with the silence he once mistook for compliance. The truth was elegantly simple. I had monetized what was mine. I had converted the very thing he took for granted into a path forward. I had capitalized on the foundation he believed would always be there waiting for him. And every time I opened my banking app, every time I added to my savings, every time I funded something that brought me genuine satisfaction, I remembered that joke. Why pay for the cow? He thought he was being clever. He didn't realize I owned the entire pasture. It's been 8 months now. Long enough for people to stop asking careful questions. Long enough for the silence to settle into something comfortable. Long enough for my life to feel like it never had his fingerprints on it at all. The apartment is still compact, still quiet, but I've made it mine in every way that matters. The walls are lined with books I actually read. The kitchen smells like garlic and fresh herbs most evenings. The plants on the windowsill are not only alive, but thriving. I named them after concepts I no longer practice. Patience, apology, compromise. The dog lives with me, of course. He came without question, tail wagging, no loyalty conflicts. I think he adjusted faster than I did. Sometimes he still perks up when he hears footsteps in the hallway, then realizes it's no one we know. And then he goes right back to his nap the way I do now. I wake up in peace, not out of obligation, not to carry someone else's emotional weight, just because I'm rested and ready. I stopped checking his social media around month 4. Before that, I used to glance occasionally, curious, not longing, but every post felt like performance art. Gym selfies, memes about loyalty and authenticity, vague quotes about growth and learning from difficult experiences, always carefully curated to suggest he was doing fine, that he was unbothered, that he'd somehow been the victim of someone cold, calculating, ungrateful. His family never posted about me. They never had. It was easier, I'm sure, to pretend I'd been just a phase. A girl who'd overreacted to a harmless joke. A name best left in the past tense. But I know what happened, and so do they. Because the thing about silence is it doesn't erase facts. It just sits with them. I heard from a mutual contact, someone who doesn't take sides but doesn't lie either, that he's back living at his childhood home in his old bedroom. Same bedspread from high school, same carpet, working freelance projects. Supposedly saving up, trying to get back on his feet, they said. But from where I stand, it looks more like trying to start over without acknowledging he never learned to stand on his own the first time. He still tells people I blindsided him. Still calls it a toxic situation. Still says I took everything, but I didn't take everything. I left him exactly what was his. That's the part he can't say out loud. Meanwhile, I've moved forward. Not just physically, but in ways that don't translate to social media updates or dinner party stories. I've made new friends. Reconnected with old ones who had quietly drifted away during the years I was too busy maintaining an unbalanced relationship. I even started dating again. Slowly, carefully, with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. I'm not looking to be rescued. Not looking to fill a gap or fix someone else's problems. There is no gap because I never needed a partner to complete me. I only ever needed one who wouldn't stand in my way. I've been building things again. Real things, not based on fantasy or future promises, but substance. I've invested time in myself, in my work, in my voice, in projects that matter to me. And I've learned how to sit with myself without shrinking to make room for someone else. There are days I still revisit the past. Not to mourn, but to verify. To remind myself that I wasn't wrong, that what happened was real, that I didn't leave because I was weak or impatient, but because I finally understood that my strength didn't need to be spent on someone who never appreciated it. Sometimes I reread the documentation I kept, not out of spite or vindication, just confirmation, to remember how thoroughly I had prepared, how quietly I had built my exit strategy, how completely I had reclaimed what was mine. I think about the version of me that once believed love meant overextending, that devotion meant debt, that being chosen would eventually come if I just kept being useful enough. She's gone now. What's left is someone calmer, sharper, more deliberate about where I place my energy. I don't need to prove anything. Not to him, not to his family, not to anyone who watched it happen and said nothing. I don't need a redemption arc. I didn't fall. I just woke up. And when I think back to that night at his family's table, the joke, the laughter, the wine in my hand that suddenly tasted like vinegar, I don't feel shame or regret. I feel gratitude, because that moment, humiliating as it was, cracked the illusion so cleanly that I couldn't repair it or ignore it. It was the final gift he didn't mean to give me. The clarity I had been afraid to reach for, the permission to stop waiting. And now I don't need metaphors about milk or cows or pastures. I'm not something free to be consumed. I'm not property to be owned or livestock to be managed. I am the deed. I am the title. I am the entire investment, and I don't graze in anyone's field. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My sister claimed I was a danger to my own kids, so I made sure she lost custody. I'm a 34-year-old single father with 2 amazing kids, my 8-year-old son and my 5-year-old daughter. Life hasn't always been easy, but I've worked hard to build a stable and happy home for us. My sister, Gabriella, is 37, married to Rodrigo, and they have 2 kids, a 10-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. On paper, Gabriella's life looks perfect. A 6-figure corporate job, a big house in the suburbs, and a husband who seems to have everything under control. But trust me, it's not as perfect as it seems. Gabriella and I were never close growing up. She was the golden child who followed all the rules, got perfect grades, and made our parents proud. Meanwhile, I was the rebel, the kid who questioned authority, made mistakes, and, according to our parents, gave them gray hairs. Gabriella loved to rub her success in my face. Even back then, she was the kind of sister who would ace a test and leave it out where I could see it, just to remind me how easy it was for her to be perfect. Our relationship didn't improve much in adulthood. Gabriella has always had this superiority complex. She likes to pretend she's offering helpful advice, but it's always thinly veiled criticism of my choices. When I decided to become a freelance graphic designer, she called it a hobby job and asked if I had thought about the kind of example I was setting for my kids. When my son chose dance over soccer, Gabriella acted like I had condemned him to a life of bullying. Don't even get me started on the time she asked if I was saving for therapy because my daughter's favorite color was black instead of pink. That's just Gabriella. The last family gathering was where everything started to fall apart. It was a backyard barbecue at our parents' house, a rare occasion when everyone showed up. My kids were running around with their cousins, laughing and having a great time, but of course, Gabriella had to make a loud comment for everyone to hear. She said something about how I let my kids run wild and how it's no surprise they never listen to anyone. I laughed it off at the moment because I've learned not to let her get under my skin, but I could feel Rodrigo's judgmental side-eye, probably mentally comparing my parenting to their color-coded chore charts and strict screen time schedules. Gabriella and Rodrigo are the definition of helicopter parents. Their kids aren't allowed to eat sugar, stay up past 7:30 p.m., or watch anything that isn't educational. Rodrigo is always posting Pinterest-worthy pictures of family game nights or homemade science projects, but their kids always look exhausted. It's like they're being raised in a pressure cooker. Meanwhile, Gabriella treats motherhood like a side gig. She works long hours and spends most of her time at family events scrolling on her phone, only stepping in to bark orders or criticize someone else. About a week after the barbecue, my mom called me, clearly uncomfortable. She told me she had heard from some extended family members that Gabriella had been saying some nasty things about me. Apparently, she had been telling people I was unfit to be a parent because I was too lenient and that my unstable lifestyle would ruin my kids. She even hinted that someone should call Child Protective Services, CPS, before it was too late. I was stunned. It's one thing to criticize me to my face, but to go behind my back and say things like that, bringing CPS into it, that's a whole new level of betrayal. A few days later, my worst fear came true. There was a knock at the door, and standing there were 2 CPS workers. They said they had received an anonymous report about unsafe living conditions and neglect. My heart was racing, but I let them in. They were polite but thorough, asking questions about everything from my kids' diet to their sleeping arrangements. They even spoke to my son and daughter, who, bless them, were confused but cooperative. After about an hour, the workers told me everything looked fine and they would be closing the case. Still, the experience left me shaken. At the next family event, I decided to confront Gabriella. I didn't accuse her outright, but I asked if she knew anything about the CPS report. She smirked and said something about how people only want what's best for the kids and how sometimes it takes an outsider to see the bigger picture. Took all I had not to scream. My parents were furious when they found out but refused to cut ties with Gabriella, saying it was important to keep the family together. Rodrigo, of course, stood by his wife, claiming they only acted out of love because I was too selfish to put my kids first. That's when I knew I couldn't trust them. I started keeping a record of everything. Every passive-aggressive comment, Every questionable thing I noticed about their parenting at family gatherings. I paid closer attention to their kids, who seemed more withdrawn each time I saw them. I didn't know where this was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let Gabriella and Rodrigo get away with this. Things started to unravel shortly after the CPS visit. One night, as I was going through my messages, I got a notification from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. It was an old friend of Rodrigo's, someone who had been close to him before he married Gabriella but had drifted apart. That's when everything began to align in ways I never expected. Rodrigo's old friend's unexpected contact initially seemed harmless, but our conversation left me with a sense that things could change. He told me that before he drifted apart from Rodrigo, he knew some things I would probably find interesting. I didn't have to press much for him to open up. Apparently, Rodrigo had skeletons in his closet. Early in his marriage to Gabriella, he had an affair with one of her coworkers. Although the affair was short-lived, it caused a quiet scandal within Rodrigo's social circle, which was likely the reason he cut ties with this friend. Gabriella knew about the affair but chose to sweep it under the rug to maintain the facade of a perfect couple. It seemed that Gabriella believed their professional success and impeccable social media presence were more important than addressing the real issues in their marriage. This information felt like a key to me. It wasn't just about the affair, but about how far they were willing to manipulate the narrative to appear perfect. I knew I couldn't just use this information directly, but it gave me a new perspective. I started observing Gabriella and Rodrigo more closely. The way Rodrigo interacted with other women, the smiles he gave to female staff at family events, even the comments he made when he thought no one was listening. Slowly, the masks they wore began to crack, at least in my eyes, and I was determined to use this. Meanwhile, I kept documenting everything. At family gatherings, I sat with their children, trying to understand what was happening in their home. The kids seemed tired, wary. It didn't take long for the eldest boy to let slip. "Dad always yells when I mess up, and Mom never has time to play with me." Those phrases were etched into my memory. I knew something was wrong, but I needed more. It was during a Christmas dinner that things began to unravel for them. Gabriella, as usual, spent most of the event on her phone, ignoring her kids. Rodrigo was visibly irritated, trying to control the situation as the kids began crying for attention. I, on the other hand, stayed quiet, observing everything. When the boy spilled a glass of juice on the table, Rodrigo lost his temper. He shouted so loudly that everyone in the room stopped. The little girl immediately started crying, and Gabriella, instead of stepping in, merely cast a look of disapproval, as if the scene was an inconvenience to her. That was the breaking point for me. In the moment, I said nothing, but it strengthened my resolve. I knew that if it were my family, CPS would have been involved again, so why shouldn't it be the same for them? I decided to act. Using what I had documented and the conversations I had with their children, I contacted a lawyer friend. I explained the situation, and he guided me on how to proceed. I filed a detailed report describing the suffocating environment those kids were being raised in. It wasn't an easy decision. Part of me knew this would cause a huge rift in the family, but another part, the part that remembered the sleepless nights after my own CPS visit, knew it was the right thing to do. It didn't take long for the consequences to start unfolding. A few weeks later, while I was dropping my kids off at school, I received a message from my mother. Gabriella was hysterical because agents were investigating her home. Whether it was irony or poetic justice, it felt like their world was finally crumbling. The agents uncovered much more than I could have imagined. It wasn't just the emotional pressure Rodrigo and Gabriella placed on their kids, but also the peculiar conditions they lived under. While the house appeared pristine for visitors and photos, the children revealed that they spent most of their time in complete silence, terrified of upsetting their parents. The strict rules and constant yelling were suffocating. Rodrigo was called in for questioning, and Gabriella, for the first time, had to face the consequences of her emotional neglect. When the news spread among relatives, Gabriella and Rodrigo's perfect image shattered. My mother tried to mediate the situation, but I was beyond reconciliation. Gabriella tried to confront me, accusing me of destroying her family, but this time I didn't hold back. I told her everything. I told her she had no right to judge me as a parent when her own household was in shambles, how she used the mask of perfection to hide her flaws, and, most importantly, how I would never forgive her for involving CPS against me without valid reasons. The following months were tough for Gabriella and Rodrigo. The CPS investigation revealed that while there was no physical abuse, the emotional environment was harmful to the children. They were mandated to attend family therapy and were supervised by social workers. The kids began spending more time with our parents, which, ironically, helped them open up more. I continued focusing on my children, determined to give them the home they deserved, but with the satisfaction of knowing that this time, justice had been served. And Gabriella? Well, she never managed to regain the image she valued so much. Her marriage to Rodrigo began to fall apart, and the criticisms she once directed at me were now aimed at him. It was like watching a house of cards built on lies collapse, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe in peace. What happened next was a slow but inevitable downward spiral for Gabriella and Rodrigo. The CPS investigation forced them into supervised therapy sessions. However, what should have been an opportunity for them to rebuild became the beginning of the end. Gabriella struggled with being under a microscope, and Rodrigo couldn't handle losing control of the narrative they had worked so hard to maintain. Their marriage started to crumble irreparably, but unlike what Gabriella might have expected, I had no interest in their personal crises. For me, the children were what mattered. Even though they were still in their parents' custody, I knew their living environment had changed. Social workers visited regularly, and Gabriella and Rodrigo's behavior was being closely monitored. They no longer had the luxury of hiding what truly went on. A few months later, during a family gathering, my mother tried to convince me to reconcile with Gabriella. According to her, the family needed to stay united. Gabriella, sensing the chance to make herself the center of attention, seized the moment to try to flip the narrative once again. With a cynical smile, she said, "If you had focused on improving your own life instead of trying to ruin mine, maybe you wouldn't have wasted so much time." I didn't hold back. Ruin your life, Gabriella? You did that yourself. You chose to prioritize your image over your children. You decided it was more important to appear perfect than to actually be a good mother. And instead of taking responsibility for your mistakes, you attacked me. You threw stones at my house without realizing yours was made of glass. She tried to argue, but for the first time, the people around us weren't on her side. Rodrigo, usually silent in these situations, looked visibly uncomfortable. It was no longer possible to sweep the truth under the rug, and everyone knew it. Gabriella began raising her voice, but my mother, who had always been lenient with her, interrupted. "Gabriella, enough. You need to stop blaming others for the consequences of your choices." That moment was a shock. My mother, who had always tried to keep the peace, finally acknowledged what everyone already knew. Gabriella wasn't a victim of anything except her own actions. A few months later, the news began to spread. Gabriella and Rodrigo's marriage officially ended. During their divorce proceedings, details that had only been whispered among relatives came to light. Rodrigo tried to use Gabriella's failings against her to gain an advantage in the division of assets, while Gabriella did the same to him. Both were willing to play dirty, but in the end, there wasn't much left for either of them. The house was sold to pay off debts, and the children were sent to live with my parents while their parents tried to piece their lives back together. I, on the other hand, was in a better place than ever. My kids thrived in a home filled with love and freedom. I had managed to expand my work as a graphic designer and was finally in a comfortable position, both financially and emotionally. It hadn't been easy to get there, but every step was a reminder that I had done what was right. Gabriella attempted to reach out to me a few times. Vague messages usually disguised as apologies, but never truly sincere. I ignored them. Surprisingly, Rodrigo did the same. Perhaps he realized far too late that Gabriella had never been as perfect as he believed. A few years later, I saw Gabriella and Rodrigo's kids again at a family reunion organized by my mother. They seemed happier, more relaxed. They even thanked me shyly for everything I had done. That's when I realized that despite all the chaos, what truly mattered was that they were okay. Somehow, I had managed to protect not only my own kids but theirs as well. As I watched them playing in the backyard with my children, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. Gabriella and Rodrigo had destroyed themselves, but the impact of their choices wouldn't last forever. The children still had a chance at something better. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't an act of hate. It was a fight for the truth, for what was right. I lost a lot in the process, but I also gained something invaluable. The certainty that I did everything I could to protect those who needed it, and for me, that was enough. Now on to the next story. Story 3. The day I was released from prison, I accidentally found $1 billion before starting the account. This story was taken from Reddit in another country, so some words might be confusing due to translation. Enjoy the story. I immediately dialed my father's number with excitement, but he hung up every time I called. Worried that something might have happened at home, I ran all the way there. But as soon as I reached the door, I heard my brother's wife complaining, "Why did he get out? Shouldn't someone like him die in prison?" My mother replied, "When he comes back, we kick him out and let him die like a poor man." Hearing their conversation made my heart sink to the bottom. I was in prison because I had to take the fall for my brother. I also paid for this house. I took care of them with all my heart, but they did this to me. I wanted to turn around and leave, but I couldn't help but knock on the door. My mother opened the door and pretended to be surprised. "Ethan, you're back so soon? Your father just mentioned he was going to pick you up." After saying that, she looked me up and down, forcing a pained expression. "You've suffered and lost so much weight over these years." Wishing I hadn't heard their conversation at the door and that her concern was genuine, I replied with a touch of bitterness, "It's okay. Taxis are convenient here." I walked into the house as I spoke. Vivian immediately came up and sprayed me with alcohol, as if she was trying to empty the whole bottle on me. "Don't think too much. I'm just using alcohol to cleanse you of any bad luck," she said, trying to make sure I didn't read too much into it, but her face was full of undisguised contempt. She despised me for being an ex-convict but seemed to have forgotten that I went to prison for her. In Leo, without saying a word, I walked straight to my room. "Don't bother looking. There's no space for you in this house," I heard my father say as I took a few steps. He was sitting on the sofa smoking, with the ashtray full of fresh cigarette butts. My arrival seemed to have greatly annoyed him. I stopped and looked at him. "Dad, I've only been in prison for 3 years. I didn't die. Do I not even deserve a room in this house?" Dad stubbed out his cigarette and said with conviction, "There are so many of us in the family and only a few rooms. There's no free space for you." I didn't argue with him, but asked, "Where's Leo? Does he feel the same?" At that moment, Leo came out of the bathroom and looked at me with some difficulty. "Ethan, Vivian is 2 months pregnant. If you live at home, there really isn't enough space. But it's okay, you're my brother. Everything will be for you first. If you really want to live here, I'll make space in the baby's room," which was already prepared. Leo was quite direct with his response. I nodded and said directly, "Sure. She won't be born for another 8 months. I'll just stay here for a while." Upon hearing this, Leo's expression froze. He moved his lips as if he wanted to say something, but stopped. Vivian couldn't hold back anymore. She angrily approached and yelled at me, "How can you be so selfish? Can't you see the house is crowded? And you really have a nerve to take our baby's room? You have a lot of nerve." I couldn't help but laugh at her anger. I looked at her and responded, "We all used to fit. I've only been in prison and your child hasn't even been born yet. Why is there not enough space now? And have you forgotten that I paid for this house in full?" My father abruptly slammed the table and said in a stern tone, "Ethan, watch your attitude. Do you think it's great that you bought a house with a full payment? Do you want to take the house away from us just after getting out of prison?" I replied with disappointment, "I'm not asking you to give me the house. You're not even offering me a room to stay in." My father said, "I've already told you there's no space for you at home. If you want to find a place to live, rent a house on your own. We don't owe you anything." My father looked at me harshly, making it clear that I was no longer welcome. "A fine thing to not owe me anything. You all cried begging me to take the blame for Leo. You said that if I took the blame, I would be the family's benefactor and that you would reward me. All I want now is to live in the room that was originally mine. Is that too much to ask? Is this how you plan to reward me? I spoke, every word laced with a whirlwind of emotions churning in my chest. It was Leo and Vivian who had been driving my car at high speed and in the wrong direction when they crashed into someone. My parents immediately came to see me. They said they had worked so hard to get Leo into a prestigious university with a bright future ahead, and that this accident shouldn't ruin his life. I, on the other hand, was just an ordinary employee at a small company with a future that paled in comparison to my brother's. So, they begged me with tears in their eyes to take the blame for Leo, saying the family would be grateful and reward me once I got out of prison. I didn't do it for any reward. I did it out of love for my parents and Leo, sacrificing my own future to take his place in prison to protect Leo. I sold my car, exhausted my savings, and lost my job. I paid the compensation, took the blame, and endured all the insults on his behalf. 3 years in prison were a torment I endured, but I held on. But I never expected that instead of a deeper sense of family, what awaited me was absolute betrayal. My dear family had become ungrateful people who would discard me once my usefulness was over. Ethan, I know you're upset, but we've also been through tough times these past 3 years. Having a criminal in the family made us the subject of ridicule wherever we went. If you really lived here, we'd be even more of a laughingstock. Can't you think of us for once? Leo, for whom I had given up everything, now revealed his true thoughts. In his eyes, I was now a burden who had brought shame to the family. Any last hope in my heart was completely extinguished. There was no warmth left in this home. All my sacrifices had become the biggest joke. Looking at Leo with a condescending attitude, I said coldly, "Leo, don't forget that it was you who should have been in prison. You are the one who brought shame to the family. If you truly cared about the family's reputation, you should have taken responsibility back then instead of enjoying my sacrifices, occupying my house, and shamelessly blaming me for not thinking about you." Hearing this, Leo blushed immediately with anger and embarrassment and retorted irritably, "You took the blame, but I've already thanked you. What more do you want from me? You're my older brother. Wasn't it your duty? Do you really need to keep reminding me of such a trivial matter?" Leo spoke as if my 3-year sentence was similar to when I used to give him the biggest piece of chicken. His simple gratitude was supposed to settle the debt. My father has always defended Leo and scolded me. As Leo's older brother, you want recognition for doing a small favor? How can you be so petty? Yes, you're a useless criminal living off the family. If you depend on us, what will happen when my child is born? Vivian, rubbing her belly, spoke ruthlessly. My mother also looked serious and told me, "Ethan, your father and I are still hoping for a grandchild. You're no longer young. Even if you go out and rent a place on your own, that's the right thing to do." They echoed each other. Each phrase pierced my heart like a sharp knife. I was utterly disappointed, but my eyes still watered uncontrollably. Looking at them, I murmured, "No wonder you never visited me once during the 3 years I was in prison. I convinced myself that you were too busy to see me, so you just found me embarrassing." I tilted my head back, holding back tears, and then asked coldly and clearly, "I'll ask you a question. Are you determined to kick me out today?" "Yes," my father replied without hesitation. My mother, Leo, and Vivian all had resolute expressions. Clearly, there was no room for negotiation. I couldn't see a trace of affection in their eyes. I nodded and declared resolutely, "Fine, from today on I cut all ties with you. I hope you don't regret it. This family isn't worth my attachment. The $100 million I had planned to share with you has nothing to do with you now." With that, I left the house without looking back. Behind me came Vivian's resentful roar, "Stop!" ending as soon as I mentioned the money. Everyone looked at me in confusion and practically in shock. As I was leaving, they asked what money I was talking about, and I ended up revealing that I had found $1 billion. They doubted it because it was such a huge amount, and I think you readers might doubt it too. But what I hadn't mentioned in the earlier parts of the story was that I found a lottery ticket, decided to play those same numbers, and that's how I won the money. I told my family about this, and immediately they changed their attitude, but not to a happy one. Rather, it turned into more anger because they thought I should give them the entire prize, not just 100 million for Ethan. They argued that if it weren't for Ethan, I wouldn't have gone to prison and found that money. I said that after all the disdain and being kicked out of the house, they still wanted me to give them my money. I left immediately without a second thought. After many missed calls and a few weeks of complete silence, I thought I could have some peace, but unfortunately I was wrong. Can you believe that my own family sued me for the prize money, claiming that Ethan should have been the one who went to prison and seen the ticket? I couldn't believe it and spared no expense on lawyers because I thought it was outrageous. After losing years of my life in prison because of him, they still had the nerve to try to take what was mine. During the entire process, it was almost surreal. My lawyer advised me to stay silent during the trial because the jury might side with my family, but I couldn't hold back when they shamelessly claimed I didn't deserve the money because I went to prison in Ethan's place. At that moment, my lawyer held me back from speaking and showed that I was innocent and that what he did was a crime. He argued that giving my winning ticket to them would be unjust since it had nothing to do with him, and requested a multi-million-dollar fine for the unjust imprisonment, with Ethan serving additional time for lying. My family started shouting that it was absurd, that I was ungrateful, and I honestly cried at that moment for all the negative things they said about me even after everything they had done. Fortunately, the jury voted in my favor, and the judge decided they should sell the house to pay me compensation and ordered not only Ethan's imprisonment but also my family's for being complicit. I was also sentenced for pretending to be the author of the crime, but the judge only imposed a bail amount that I could easily cover with the prize money. My family was outraged, and while I could have sought to overturn the sentence, I wanted to see them go through everything I went through, and I haven't heard from them since. Do you think I did the right thing? Now on to the next story. Story 4. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to walk away from his own family mid-vacation. But when I saw what they really thought of me, written out word for word in their own group chat, something in me just broke. I'm not talking about some silly inside joke or harmless teasing. I'm talking about betrayal with a smirk, dressed up as sarcasm, layered under years of resentment they never had the guts to say out loud. And the worst part, I paid for everything. The rental house, the flights, the meals, the gas, the excursions, every stupid matching hoodie. All of it. I shelled out over $5,000, thinking I was doing something kind, something memorable. I thought I was helping us reconnect. I thought I was finally being seen. Turns out I was just giving them new material to laugh at. My name's Noah. I'm 33, live alone in a decently quiet part of Oregon, and by all external measures I guess you could say I'm doing okay. I've got a stable remote job in tech, a modest house I paid off early, and no debt to speak of. I'm not flashy about it. I drive a used Subaru, still use an iPhone 12, and cook most of my meals at home. But I've always had this lingering chip on my shoulder when it comes to my family. My younger brother, Caleb, is 29, loud, charming, naturally athletic, and the sort of guy people just instinctively like. He's the golden boy. My older sister, Megan, is 36, sharp as a knife, always on the go. A mother of two with a tendency to steamroll conversations without noticing. My parents, now retired, are nice enough in that smile politely and never dig too deep kind of way. We don't fight. We don't get vulnerable. We do polite holidays and occasional calls, and that's it. I've always been the background character in this family. Reliable, quiet, always offering to help. Never quite included, but always expected to show up. 2 years ago, I had this idea. I thought maybe what we needed was a proper trip. Not just a long weekend or another awkward Thanksgiving dinner, but a real family vacation. Something with sunshine, ocean air, and no room to make excuses. I figured if I planned everything, paid for it all, and kept things simple, maybe we'd start to feel like more than just a group of people who happen to be related. Maybe we could feel like a family again. I pitched it during our Christmas gathering, the one where Megan's youngest threw up on the couch and Caleb spent the whole night scrolling Instagram. I stood up with a smile, trying not to sound too eager, and said, "What if we all did a beach trip next summer? My treat. I'll book the house, cover the flights, take care of food. You just show up." They all looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Then my mom said, "Oh, honey, that's generous." And Megan immediately started asking about logistics, like what dates and whether the house would be kid-proof. Caleb joked about needing good Wi-Fi and at least one bar with cute bartenders. No one said thank you, but they didn't say no either, so I went ahead and made it happen. I spent weeks combing through rental listings, comparing flight options, planning kid-friendly activities, and adult-friendly dinners. I rented a big house on the coast in California, walking distance from the beach with a hot tub and enough rooms for everyone. I booked flights, rental cars, even reserved a local seafood place for our first night. I made sure there were snacks for the kids, drinks for the adults, and groceries for breakfasts. I paid the deposits up front and sent everyone detailed itineraries in a shared Google Drive. Megan didn't open it. Caleb said sick, and then disappeared for 3 weeks. But again, no one said no. When the trip finally came around, I was nervous, more than I wanted to admit. I landed early and picked everyone up from the airport, smiling like some overeager Airbnb host. Megan looked exhausted, juggling 2 car seats and snapping at her husband. Caleb showed up with only a backpack and asked if there'd be beer at the house. My parents were the last ones out. My dad limping slightly from his recent hip replacement, my mom carrying way too much luggage for a 5-day trip. I handled all of it. I loaded the bags, drove the rental, checked us in, got groceries that first night while everyone else rested. I cooked dinner while Caleb watched TV and Megan scrolled on her phone. When I finally sat down to eat, no one had waited. The kids were already upstairs playing with the sand toys I bought them. My mom said, "This is lovely, Noah," while staring at her plate. My dad just nodded and said, "Good fish." Megan asked if there was almond milk. Caleb said nothing. Still, I kept telling myself it was worth it, that this was just the warm-up, that once we were settled in and had a couple of beach days, things would loosen up. I tried not to let it bother me when Caleb didn't offer to split the grocery bill or when Megan commandeered the nicest bedroom for her kids without asking. I told myself it was fine when my mom offered to fix the eggs after I'd already made breakfast, then remade the entire thing. I even let it go when Caleb borrowed my charger without asking and somehow lost it at the beach. I was trying so hard to be the bigger person, to be the glue, to be the one who finally made our family feel like one. The first real crack happened on the second night. We were sitting on the patio after dinner, the one meal we all ate together without someone getting up halfway through, and Caleb was scrolling his phone, snickering to himself. Megan was helping her daughter with a puzzle, and my mom was sipping wine, staring at the ocean. Caleb looked up, grinned, and said, "Man, some people really think money buys connection, huh?" I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just saying. It's funny how some folks think booking a house makes them a hero or something." Megan chuckled, not looking up. "Well, better than doing nothing, I guess," she said. My stomach turned. I wanted to ask if they were talking about me, but I didn't. I just laughed along and told myself I was being paranoid. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in the living room scrolling through pictures I'd taken of the day. The kids building a sand castle, my dad dozing off under an umbrella, Megan laughing at something her husband said. I felt this strange, aching warmth, like maybe all the effort was finally worth something. Maybe they'd remember this. Maybe they'd see me differently. I was still smiling when Caleb came down the stairs, yawning and holding his phone. "Hey man, my phone's dead," he said. "Mind if I borrow yours to call Amber?" His on-again, off-again girlfriend, I assumed. I handed it over without hesitation. "Sure," I said. "Lock codes 2007. He nodded, called her, paced the patio for a few minutes, then came back inside. "Thanks," he said, tossing it gently on the couch. I picked it up after he left and saw that a bunch of apps were still open. Texts. GroupMe. I went to close them out. That's when I saw it. A group chat titled, "Fam Jam, Noah Free." I paused. The name stung. My thumb hovered. I told myself not to look, that I was probably misunderstanding, that maybe it was an old thread from college, but my name was right there. A new message at the top from Megan. I tapped it open. What I saw made my face go cold. The first message that popped up was from Megan. "Did you see how he laid out all the beach towels like we're staying at a resort?" Followed by a laughing emoji. Then Caleb. "Bro thinks he's some kind of dad now. just waiting for him to schedule a family bonding circle after dinner. Megan again. All this just to feel included. It's kind of sad if you think about it. And this one physically hurt. My mom. Well, at least he's trying. Some people express love with money, I guess. My dad didn't comment, but he left a thumbs-up reaction. Thumbs up like he approved. I kept scrolling. There were pages and pages of this stuff. Every little thing I'd done had been twisted into a punchline. When I bought extra sunscreen and aloe vera because Megan's kid got burnt the first day, Caleb wrote, "He's doing the full dad cosplay. What's next? Personalized fanny packs." Megan replied, "Stop it," loudly crying face. I wouldn't be surprised if he gave us all laminated itineraries. My mom added, "I just hope he doesn't think this means we owe him anything." There was more, so much more. He really thinks this trip makes up for all those years of not showing up. Cute. All this effort just to be seen. He doesn't even realize we've already moved on without him. Let him play vacation host. Just keep smiling so he doesn't go full sad boy on us. I sat there on the couch, phone trembling in my hand. Every word I read dug in deeper. I could feel the heat in my chest crawling up into my neck. I kept blinking, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less cruel. But they didn't. They stayed there, burned into the screen like someone had taken every passing doubt I'd ever had about my place in this family and finally confirmed it with receipts. The worst part? I really deeply believed, that I was building something good here, that I was finally being included. And instead, I was the punchline to a private joke I never even knew existed. The room was so quiet I could hear the fridge humming in the kitchen. Everyone else was asleep outside. The waves kept rolling in like nothing had happened. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. Eventually, I set the phone face down on the coffee table, walked outside barefoot, and sat on the deck in the cold coastal air, knees pulled to my chest like I was 10 years old again. And that's when I started thinking not just about what I'd read, but about everything that came before it. It's strange how fast memories sharpen when you're hurt. Little things I brushed off suddenly felt razor sharp. Megan never once asked me how work was going. Caleb used my car to get beer and didn't even refill the tank. When I offered to take their kids out for mini-golf so they could have a date night, Megan told me, "You don't need to keep trying so hard." My mom kept asking me if I was seeing anyone yet, then sighing like the answer disappointed her every time. My dad had said exactly 7 sentences to me since we arrived. The next morning, I didn't say anything. I acted like everything was fine. I made pancakes for everyone, even remembered to do vegan ones for Megan's husband, which he didn't even touch. I loaded the dishwasher. I laughed when Caleb told a story about his high school friends. I helped my dad down to the beach and set up the umbrella. All the while, I kept thinking, they have no idea I know. But once the illusion cracks, it doesn't uncrack. Everything started feeling performative, brittle, like we were all actors in some clumsy play where I was the fool dressed in generosity. On day 3, things really tipped. That morning, I was walking back from a coffee run. Yes, for everyone, with their orders noted in my phone, when I overheard Caleb on the phone. He was on the patio, pacing, talking low. I slowed my steps just enough to hear, staying behind the half-closed sliding door. "She's already said we can crash at her place in LA after this," he was saying. "Honestly, thank God, dude. I'm losing my mind with Mr. Cruise Director. If I have to sit through one more of his family moments, I'm gonna puke." Pause, then a chuckle. Nah, he paid for everything. Flights, house, food, all him. It's like his sad little redemption tour. Megan calls it the guilt trip. Pretty accurate, huh? I stepped back before I heard more, walked around the side of the house, waited 5 minutes, and came back in through the front like nothing happened. Caleb gave me a nod, took his caramel macchiato without thanks, and walked off to scroll on the couch. The rest of the day felt like I was watching a slow-motion collapse. Every comment, every glance, every moment of silence echoed louder. At dinner, my mom told Megan how sweet it was that she brought homemade cookies. Megan beamed. I had cooked the actual meal. No mention. At one point, Megan told me to stop hovering when I tried to help her kids with their sand toys. My dad asked me to turn down the music on the patio, music that Caleb had chosen. Megan's husband offered to take over grilling, but handed the tongs back to me 5 minutes later because he didn't know how to work the temp settings. That night, I went to bed early, but not before triple-checking every reservation and charge I had lined up in my name. It's weird how fast it happens. The moment when disappointment turns into clarity. When the voice in your head finally says, "They're not going to change. You don't have to keep trying." The breaking point came the next morning. I'd gone out early for another grocery run because, of course, no one else thought to. I figured I'd stock up on snacks, drinks, and maybe pastries for breakfast. It was our 4th day in, and I was still clinging to this ghost of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could still turn around. When I came back, I parked outside and immediately noticed something off. The house was quiet, too quiet. I walked in through the front door, balancing bags on both arms. And there at the kitchen table was Megan, Caleb, and my mom. Caleb had his phone out, and they were all looking at it. My mom looked up at me like a kid caught stealing cookies. Megan froze. Caleb didn't. He just smirked. "Hey Noah, you ever think about how weird it is that you're the only one not in the group chat?" I froze. Something about his voice, the way he said it like it was a joke, but not really. Megan muttered, "Caleb," but he just kept going. "No, seriously, we've had it for months now. All the trip planning and stuff. Yeah, we moved it out of the main chat, 'cause you were getting intense." Megan added, "We didn't mean anything by it. You were just kind of overwhelming. The spreadsheets, the daily plans. It was a lot." I set the bags down slowly. "You made a group chat without me?" I said, my voice quiet. Caleb shrugged. "Don't take it so personally, man. You know you can be a little much. Always planning things, double-checking, trying to make everything perfect." Megan nodded. "We just wanted space to vent. That's all. You didn't do anything wrong." I laughed. I actually laughed, which seemed to throw them off. "Noah," my mom started gently, "you've always had a big heart. But sometimes people need to make their own plans, too. You don't have to control everything." Control. That word echoed in my head like a slap. I wasn't trying to control anything. I was trying to give, to share, to build. And they saw it as control. That's when Caleb's sweet, always charming Caleb, delivered the final punch. "Look," he said, standing up. "You don't have to keep buying our love, bro. We're family. You don't need to pay for everything just to be included." Something snapped in me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there and stared at them. These people I'd bent over backwards for. People I thought I loved. People who thought love was something I was trying to purchase. And in that quiet moment, something shifted. I calmly picked up my phone, opened the airline app, and booked the earliest flight back home. Then I opened every reservation in my name, rental cars, excursions, dinner bookings, even the theme park tickets for the kids, and I canceled every single one. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I had one more thing to do. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with my eyes wide open, the sound of the waves outside mocking me with their rhythm. Everyone else was asleep, or at least pretending to be, and I was in the upstairs guest room, staring at the ceiling like it held answers. Every few minutes, my mind looped another line from that group chat. Another joke at my expense. Another smile that now felt fake in hindsight. The emotional whiplash was unreal. I went from being the glue trying to hold this family together to realizing I was just duct tape on something they didn't even want fixed. But something strange happened during those silent hours. The ache started to dull. It didn't go away, not even close, but it changed, hardened, turned into something sharp and solid. And somewhere around 3 a.m., I stopped feeling the need to cry. I started planning. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I didn't shower. I didn't brush my teeth. I just got dressed, grabbed my backpack, and walked into the kitchen. The house was quiet, still, like it knew what was about to happen. I took a sticky note from the drawer and a Sharpie from the junk cup by the fridge. I wrote slowly and deliberately. Didn't realize generosity was something to laugh at. Enjoy the bill. I stuck it dead center on the fridge door. Then I walked out. I called an Uber to the airport, got through security, and sat by my gate 4 hours early. It wasn't even 9 a.m. yet. My flight was the only thing moving forward in my life at that moment. Everything else felt like it had stalled, but somehow I felt still. No more spiraling. No more trying to replay every conversation. Just stillness. As I boarded the plane, I didn't look back. I didn't check my phone. I didn't send a message. I didn't even post on social media. Let them find out on their own after they'd finished their breakfast. It was a long flight and I had time to think. And that's where the real fall began, because you can leave a place. You can walk away. You can even cancel the credit card that paid for the rental car, which I absolutely did. Enjoy that whole fee, Megan. But what you can't leave behind is the feeling of betrayal. It clings to you like salt water in your clothes. The plane landed and I got home, unlocked my front door, stepped inside, and then just stood there in the quiet, in the emptiness, and I broke. I didn't even make it to the couch. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and let it all out. All the things I didn't let myself feel at the rental house. The humiliation, the bitterness, the raw, bleeding ache of realizing you were never really seen. Not the way you hoped, not the way you tried to be. I cried, ugly, heaving sobs that left me lightheaded. I hadn't cried like that in years, maybe ever. That was rock bottom. I spent the next day in pajamas. I didn't answer calls. I didn't check texts. My phone buzzed a few times. One from Megan, one from Caleb, and a long, rambling one from my mom that started with, "We're worried about you," and ended with, "We didn't mean to hurt you." I didn't read them. Couldn't. Not yet. I ordered takeout. I watched a documentary with the volume too low. I sat in my backyard until it got cold. I didn't talk to anyone. But on the third day, something shifted. Started with eggs. I woke up early, not on purpose. My body just didn't want to sleep anymore. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and saw a carton of eggs. So I cooked. Nothing fancy, just scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee. The smell filled the house, and for some reason, it made me feel human again. I sat down, took a bite, and thought, okay, one normal thing. One thing that's mine. Then I opened my laptop. I hadn't checked my work email since the trip began. My company wasn't the kind to breathe down your neck during PTO, but I figured there'd be a few things needing my attention. What I didn't expect was the email from our VP of product. Subject line: "Are you ready? Inside, we're ready to move you to lead. If you are, let's talk when you're back. Well deserved, Noah." I stared at it for a while. I'd been quietly grinding for years, doing good work, taking on extra projects, mentoring junior devs. Never flashy, never loud, just showing up again and again in the background. And now, someone finally saw it. Not because I begged, not because I paid for it, but because I earned it. And that felt different. I replied, "I'm ready." That was the first domino. Over the next few weeks, I got back into routine. I started waking up early again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I picked up my running shoes for the first time in months. Just a jog around the block at first, but it felt good to breathe. I cleaned out the spare room and turned it into a proper office. I ordered a real desk, not the cheap folding table I'd been using since I moved in. I started therapy. I told my therapist, a kind woman named Sienna, everything. The vacation, the group chat, the note on the fridge, the crying on the floor. She didn't interrupt, didn't rush to fix it, just let me say it all. Then she looked at me and said, "You've spent your whole life trying to be enough for people who don't know how to see you. That's exhausting, Noah. What would it look like if you stopped?" I didn't have an answer, but I started trying to find one. Around that time, I reconnected with an old college friend, Mateo. He saw one of my Instagram stories. I'd posted a picture of a sunrise from my backyard with the caption, "Still here." He messaged me, "Yo, you alive? Want to get coffee?" I said, "Yes." Mateo was the kind of friend you didn't have to perform for. We hadn't talked in months, but the moment we sat down, it felt easy, real. I didn't go into the whole story, but I told him I'd just been through a rough family trip. He winced. "Dude," he said, "been there. Families can suck the soul out of you without even noticing. You okay?" "I will be," I said. And I meant it. We started hanging out again. Movies, hikes, late-night taco runs. He introduced me to his circle: artists, coders, musicians, weirdos, people who didn't care what job you had or how much you made. They just liked good stories and good company. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was auditioning. One night, a month or so after the trip, we were sitting around a bonfire in Mateo's backyard. Someone handed me a beer. Someone else was passing a guitar around. And someone asked what I did. I told them about my job, but also that I'd recently started writing again. Just short stories. Nothing big. They asked to read one. I said maybe. Later that night, I walked home under the stars, buzzed on cheap beer and soft laughter, and thought, this is what I was chasing. Not family, not approval. Connection. Real connection. And here's the wild part. The more I stopped chasing my family's love, the more I started to see how little of it was ever really there. Not in the way I needed. Megan sent another text. Long, apologetic, but hollow. She said, "You're taking this too personally," which basically erased everything else. Caleb left a voicemail, tipsy sounding, saying, "Come on, man. It was just jokes. You know we love you. But love that has to be proven with humiliation isn't love, it's control," and I was done with that. I didn't block them. I just stopped replying. In the silence that followed, I found something better than closure. I found peace. I started volunteering at a local mentorship program for teens interested in tech. I taught a few weekend classes. One kid, Marcus, reminded me a lot of myself at that age. Quiet, observant, desperate to be good at something. I helped him build his first app. He emailed me a week later saying, "Thanks. No one's ever really believed in me like that before." That message made me cry harder than anything else had. I was rebuilding. Not loud, not dramatic, just piece by piece. The rise was slow, uneven. There were still days I'd think about that chat thread and feel the burn. Still moments I'd catch myself wondering what it would have felt like if they just said, "Thank you." But those moments got fewer, softer, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't begging to be seen. I was learning to stand in the light by myself. And then, just as the wounds were finally starting to scab over, something unexpected showed up at my door. Package. No return address, just my name written in Megan's handwriting. Inside was something I hadn't seen in years. A photo. Me, Caleb, and Megan, summer 2002. We were at the lake, sunburnt, grinning. I was holding a fishing rod too big for me, and Caleb had just splashed me. We looked like siblings, real ones. Taped to the back was a note. "You deserved better than we gave you. I'm sorry. I mean that. Call me when you're ready." I stared at that photo for a long time, and that's when the next part of the story began. I didn't call her. Not right away. For days, the photo sat on my desk, half tucked under my monitor like some kind of test. Every time I sat down to work, there it was. Grinning versions of us, frozen in time. Before we all grew into roles we never asked for. Before the sarcasm, before the guilt, before the realization that being family didn't mean being kind. Her note haunted me. "You deserved better than we gave you." Part of me wanted to believe it, desperately, that maybe this was the turning point, that Megan had finally stepped off her high horse and looked around. But the smarter part, the part that had been ignored at every dinner table, brushed off at every holiday, quietly ridiculed in every group chat, told me to be cautious. She hadn't said we were wrong. She hadn't said, "We're sorry for laughing at your kindness." Just that I deserved better. An acknowledgement of the symptom, not the disease. So I didn't call. Instead, I watched, because when someone shows you who they are, you start noticing the ways they always were. It started with Caleb. A week after the package arrived, Mateo sent me a screenshot. He and I had stayed close, closer than ever, really, and we'd started bouncing ideas off each other for a side project. A mentorship platform for first-gen tech kids, a proper scalable one. Not just volunteer shifts, but a startup with teeth. The screenshot was of Caleb's Instagram story. He was in LA, shirtless on a rooftop pool holding a glass of something obnoxiously orange. The caption: "Some people buy vacations to feel loved. Others just live." I didn't need to wonder who he was talking about. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Mateo already knew the backstory. Instead, I saved the screenshot. Later that night, I opened the group chat thread again. I hadn't touched it since the trip. It still hurt. That buzzing, acidic hurt that makes your ears warm and your teeth clench. But this time, I wasn't looking for pain. I was looking for patterns. And what I found was a gold mine. It was like they couldn't help themselves. Megan and Caleb especially. Screenshots, gossip, petty jabs. They'd been mocking me for months before the trip, long before the towels and spreadsheets. They called it the Noah Project. Megan even made a meme at one point. A photoshopped picture of me holding a whiteboard with the caption, "How to win family affection in 3 easy payments." I read every message, every LOL, every, "Can you believe this?" every sarcastic emoji. I took notes, captured timestamps, backed up the chat, and when I was done, I sat back and thought, all right, so this is what we're dealing with. This wasn't immaturity. This was entitlement. I didn't want revenge that looked like anger. I wanted precision. I wanted them to feel what I had felt, not in cruelty but in clarity, to finally see the impact of their choices. And the best way to do that was to let them come to me. So I waited. A week after the package, Megan called. I didn't pick up. She called again 2 days later. Then, Caleb texted, "Yo, me's trying to reach you. You good?" I ignored him too. Instead, I started digging. The more I pulled at the thread, the more it unraveled. Turns out Caleb was between jobs again. His last contract gig dried up 2 months before the vacation. He was living with a friend in LA, hoping to land a podcast deal that hadn't materialized. He was broke, but you wouldn't know it from his feed. Megan was worse. On the surface, she looked like the picture of suburban efficiency. Married with 2 kids, part-time copywriting job, homeowner. But behind the scenes, she was drowning. Her husband had lost his job last fall. They were 2 months behind on mortgage payments. Their car lease was up soon, and she was quietly trying to convince my parents to help just until things stabilized. None of this was my business, technically, but they had made me their business for years, laughing at my job, my home, my singleness, my quietness. Now they needed help. And I had leverage, not financial leverage. That's what they expected. What I had now was truth. The power to expose the version of themselves they thought no one saw. The chats, the comments, the jokes, and more importantly, the receipts of what I had done for them quietly and without fanfare. But that wasn't my endgame. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted them to see me. And nothing reveals character like the moment someone realizes they've burned the bridge they still need to cross. So I made a plan. First, I scheduled a dinner, a real one, neutral location. I booked a cozy, quiet Italian place in town, and I sent a simple message to Megan, Caleb, and my parents. Dinner next Saturday. Just us. 7 p.m. My treat. Megan replied first. Really? Thank you. Then Caleb. Free food. I'm there. My mom took longer, but finally sent. Looking forward to it. Love you. I didn't reply. The days leading up to the dinner were oddly peaceful. I felt like someone watching chess pieces shift into place. At work, I accepted the new lead position with grace and quiet confidence. I even hosted a Zoom seminar for interns about emotional resilience in tech. The irony wasn't lost on me. In the background, Mateo and I finalized the prototype for the mentorship platform. We pitched it to an angel investor friend of his. Just a rough meeting, no expectations. The guy loved it, asked for a full deck and roadmap. Suddenly, we were building something real. I spent the night before the dinner prepping. Not a speech, not a rant, just a collection of facts. I printed screenshots, timeline summaries, financial breakdowns, every booking from the vacation, labeled and color-coded. Not to shame, to show. Because these people lived in a fog of denial, and I was ready to part the clouds. The night of the dinner, I arrived early. The restaurant was dimly lit, all warm wood and soft jazz. I chose a round table near the back. Intimate, no distractions. I sat there with a folder in my bag and fire in my chest. They arrived together. Megan in a soft blue blouse, Caleb in a bomber jacket, my parents holding hands like they were walking into church. They smiled when they saw me. I didn't smile back. We sat. We ordered. Small talk started. The kids, the weather, some new show on Netflix. I let it happen. I let them settle. I let them pretend this was normal. Then, after the appetizers came, I reached into my bag. Before we eat, I said, there's something I need to share. They all looked at me, forks midair. I pulled out the folder, placed it on the table. Inside were the screenshots, the chat logs, the receipts, the total cost of the vacation highlighted at the bottom. $5,842.71. Silence. Caleb blinked. Megan's face drained of color. My mom looked confused. My dad looked tired. I found the group chat, I said calmly. All of it. The memes, the jokes, the comments about how I was trying to buy your love. The threads about me being overbearing, desperate, sad. Megan opened her mouth. I held up a hand. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to clarify. You don't have to love me. You don't have to appreciate me. But what you don't get to do is rewrite reality. I looked each of them in the eye. I paid for everything. Not because I wanted to feel needed, but because I thought for a second that this family might want to feel whole again. My voice cracked just slightly, enough. And instead, you made me the villain of a vacation I built for you. You mocked me privately, repeatedly, and then smiled to my face. Megan whispered, Noah. But I kept going. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not even mad anymore. But I needed you to see what you did. Not filtered through your intentions, but through your impact. Silence. And then, for the first time in my life, I watched them squirm. Caleb looked away. My mom stared at her lap. Megan's hands trembled. I leaned back, took a sip of water and said, Enjoy the food. I'll be leaving before dessert. Then I stood up. I reached into my wallet, pulled out a prepaid gift card, and placed it on the table. Covers the bill, I said. So no one has to worry about me trying to buy love. And with that, I walked out. But that was only the beginning. What came after, the messages, the fallout, the final reckoning, is something you're going to want to hear. I thought walking out of that restaurant would be the end of it. I pictured it so clearly. A quiet exit, the sound of my footsteps down the hallway, the click of the door as I left my family in stunned silence behind me. No one chasing me into the parking lot. No teary apology. Just them finally staring at the reflection they'd spent years avoiding and me free at last. And in a way, that was the end of trying. But not the end of the story, because people like Megan and Caleb don't know how to sit with silence. They need noise, control, and explanation to twist into their version of events. So, naturally, they didn't wait long. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of missed calls. 7 from Megan, 3 from Caleb, a message from my mom that started with, I don't understand why you had to humiliate us like that, and ended with, this isn't how family behaves. The irony practically lit itself on fire. I didn't reply, but Caleb didn't take the hint. 2 days later, I came home from a walk to find him sitting on the hood of my car in my driveway, arms crossed. Wearing sunglasses like this was a music video and not an ambush. Yo, he said, as if we were still boys in a dorm room and not estranged siblings with a wall of betrayal between us. Can we talk? I didn't say anything, just walked past him, unlocked the front door, and left it open. He followed inside. He tried to lean against the kitchen counter like he owned the place. Classic Caleb, never met a boundary he didn't ignore. Look, man, he started. That dinner, that was rough. I didn't answer, just poured myself a glass of water and waited. He sighed. I get it. Okay, you're mad. We said stuff, stupid stuff, but it was jokes, Noah. That's how we are. You know that. Do I? I asked quietly. He faltered. I mean, yeah, we razz each other all the time. You call it razzying, I said. But no one else got a private group chat. No one else got edited memes. You didn't make fun of Megan for planning her kids' birthday parties. You didn't call mom desperate for baking casseroles. Just me. Just the guy trying to make it easier for everyone. He ran a hand through his hair. We didn't mean for it to get that far. Honestly, I didn't think you'd take it like that. That's the problem, I said. You never think. Not about how your words land, not about who you hurt. It's always just jokes with you, Caleb. But the punchline is always at someone else's expense. He went quiet. Then, after a beat, he said, "Well, I came to ask a favor." And there it was. The real reason. I didn't even blink. "What do you need?" He shifted. "So, I'm kind of in between gigs right now. I was supposed to get into this creator house deal, content stuff, networking, whatever. But they pulled out and I'm trying to keep my podcast going. But I need gear. New mic, editing suite, laptop. I figured maybe you could spot me just to get things rolling again." I laughed. Couldn't help it. Not a joyful laugh, a hollow one. The kind you give when you realize the person in front of you has no shame. "You want me to fund your podcast?" I said. "Not fund like help. You've got the job, the house, the side hustle. You're doing good, man. And you thought showing up after months of mocking me would be the way to get a loan." His jaw clenched. "So that's it, huh? You're going to be petty now after everything we've been through." I stepped forward, ice. Petty would be posting the screenshots online. Petty would be forwarding them to Mom's church group. Petty would be texting your ex those DMs I found from when you were still with her. His face went pale. "You wouldn't." "I won't," I said, "because I don't need to. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for clarity. You don't get to insult me, diminish me, then expect help like nothing happened. That version of me is gone." He stared at me, mouth open. "No words. Now, get off my property." He left slowly, bitterly, like he couldn't believe the golden goose had closed the door. But I wasn't done. Because while Caleb tried to climb his imaginary ladder, Megan had started her own campaign. The guilt tour. She sent long emails. Apologies laced with passive aggression. "I just want us to be okay again," she wrote. "The kids miss their uncle. They don't understand why you're being so distant." She even posted a family throwback photo on Facebook, captioned, "We don't always get it right, but family is forever." The comments were full of "Aw, beautiful family." And even a few "Where's Noah?" replies. I didn't answer. Instead, I made my move. Subtle, surgical, and deeply satisfying. See, that mentorship startup Mateo and I were building? It had legs. After our pitch, we got a seed round from 2 angel investors. Not huge money, but enough to launch a beta and build a team. Guess who applied for a remote admin position? Megan's husband. I nearly didn't notice. He applied under a different email, but his resume gave it away. Marketing experience, location, family details. It was him. No cover letter, just a shot in the dark. I showed Mateo. "Want me to toss it?" he asked. I thought for a moment, then smiled. "No, let's interview him." We did. Zoom call, professional, brief. He was polite, slightly nervous, clearly hadn't put it together. Told us he was looking for something stable, remote, flexible. Said his wife was stressed lately and he was trying to take pressure off. Totally understand, I said. We value loyalty here. Integrity, transparency. He nodded. 2 days later, I sent a rejection email, politely worded but final. And I knew Megan would feel it. Not immediately, but eventually when he came home and told her, when she asked what company it was, when she realized the name, when she remembered who helped co-found it. And that, more than any confrontation, was enough. I didn't need a meltdown. I didn't need a blow-up. I just needed them to know. To sit in the consequences of their own choices. To realize that the person they treated like a doormat had quietly built something solid under their feet and walked away while they stumbled. I wish I could say the fallout was cinematic, that they begged, that there was a dramatic scene on a rainy street corner. But real life isn't a movie. It's quieter, colder, more permanent. They stopped calling. Eventually, the texts trickled down to none. My mom sent one last message a few weeks later. We don't know what else to say. I hope you're happy. I really do. I didn't reply because I am happy. Not because I got revenge. Not because I outmaneuvered them, but because I finally stopped fighting for scraps from people who were never willing to give. I stopped begging to be seen. I started living as if I mattered, because I do. And now my life is full of people who see that. friends who show up, work that fulfills me, a startup that's already changing lives. I mentor, I run, I laugh, I am whole. And as for them, they're free to keep telling their version of the story, that I'm cold, that I walked away, that I held a grudge. But deep down, they know the truth. Because in the end, I didn't burn the bridge. I just made sure they could never cross it again. And I smiled as I watched them finally realize the door was never locked. They were just never invited. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My name's Ryan and I'm 33 now. But the story I'm about to tell you happened when I was just 18. Old enough to vote. Technically an adult, but still naive enough to believe that family meant safety. That your family wouldn't turn on you for a laugh. That you could be the quiet one and still be seen. I was wrong. Growing up, I was the extra sibling, not the baby. That was my sister, Kelsey. Not the golden child. That was my older brother, Adam. I was just there. The default helper, the one who stayed quiet so my parents could manage the louder ones. I did chores without being asked, covered for Kelsey when she snuck out, helped Adam with his car payments when he blew his summer job money. My parents praised me with a pat on the back and a, "We don't have to worry about Ryan." I guess that meant they didn't have to think about me either. The road trip was my dad's idea. Some last summer together before everyone moves on kind of thing. A loop through the Midwest, visiting national parks, and staying at motels that smelled like old AC units and disappointment. I didn't argue. I even offered to help plan it. I built the itinerary, mapped the route, printed backup directions in case Dad's GPS failed. But when we left, Adam sat in the front seat. Kelsey picked the music. I rode in the back next to a cooler that leaked all over my bag. Typical. The joke started somewhere in Nebraska. We'd stopped at a gas station, middle of nowhere, dusty town with one blinking light, and a diner that looked like it hadn't updated the menu since the 60s. I went inside to grab water and some snacks. When I came back out, the van was gone. At first, I thought they were just moving it. Or maybe Dad had parked around back. I walked the lot twice, then 3 times. The gas station clerk looked at me funny. "You lose your ride?" she asked, cracking gum between every word. "Just waiting," I mumbled, checking my phone. No messages. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. I tried calling. No answer. Eventually, Adam picked up, snickering before hanging up. That was when it sank in. They'd done this on purpose. A prank, or what they would call a prank. Another call. This time it was Kelsey. "Let's see if you can find your way back, Melon," she laughed. "Maybe you'll finally grow a personality." They thought it was funny. Character building. My mom later said it was a bonding moment for the rest of us. I sat on the curb outside that gas station for 3 hours before the clerk finally came out and offered me a bottle of orange soda. "You okay, hon?" she asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. They didn't come back. At least not that day or the next. When I finally got a ride into the next town with a trucker named Hank, whose silence was more comforting than any of my family's laughter, I used what little cash I had to buy a bus ticket. I didn't go home. I went to a friend's place 3 states away, slept on his couch, took a dishwashing job, told him it was temporary. It wasn't. My phone buzzed nonstop the first week. Then less. Then not at all. When I finally checked voicemail, there was a message from Mom. "It's been 3 days. Enough already. Come back and stop being dramatic." Dramatic. That was the word they always used when I tried to speak up. When I said it hurt to be the afterthought. When I said it felt like I didn't matter unless they needed a ride or a favor. I didn't call them back. I didn't answer the messages. And after a while, they stopped trying. I got a job, then a second one, moved into a studio, went back to school quietly online. Built something for myself, piece by piece. No credit cards in Dad's name. No loans co-signed by Mom. No social media, just distance. Peace. Years passed. I met people who saw me not for what I could do for them, but for who I was. I stopped apologizing for existing, and eventually I stopped looking back until last month. I was working late, still do tech support, freelance now, better hours, and my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Then another, then a flood, one after the other. When I checked, it wasn't just unknown numbers. It was them. Mom, Adam, Kelsey, even Dad. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. A total of 107. And then came the message that froze me in place. Ryan, we need to talk. It's about Grandma. But it wasn't about Grandma. Not really. That was just the excuse. Because when they finally found me, it wasn't grief in their eyes. It was desperation. I didn't respond. Not right away. I sat in the dark with my phone screen glowing against my palm, scrolling through the messages. Some were short, just call me. Others were more emotional. My mom's were peppered with guilt-wrapped phrases like, we didn't know you felt that way, and it was never meant to go that far. Kelsey sent a selfie of her and some kid with the caption, your niece wants to meet you, with a smiley face, like that would erase everything. Adam's was the most direct. You ghosted your whole family over a joke. Grow up. A joke. 15 years of silence over a joke. I powered off the phone, but I couldn't sleep. All night my mind churned, not with regret, but with disbelief. I built a life, quiet, stable, my own. And now the people who tossed me aside like a spare sock had suddenly remembered I existed because of Grandma. I wasn't heartless. Grandma had been kind to me when no one else really was. She used to slip me $5 bills just for being polite. She once told me in a whisper over mashed potatoes, you see everything, don't you? I never forgot that. So yeah, the thought of her being gone hit me in the chest. But I also knew my family. I knew how they operated. Emotion was just a means to an end. Guilt was currency, and I had a feeling they were cashing in. I waited a week. During that time, I kept a burner phone nearby and started collecting threats, quiet inquiries, a few searches, a LinkedIn visit here, a Facebook scroll there. I didn't post or respond, just observed. It didn't take long to piece it together. Grandma had passed 3 months ago. They didn't tell me then. No, the 107 calls started after the reading of the will, and I was in it heavily. Grandma had left me her house, a paid-off little place in the suburbs. I remembered visiting only twice as a kid. Once during a thunderstorm, once at Christmas when she made peppermint cocoa from scratch. She'd also left me her savings, apparently. Nothing massive, but enough. More than enough to turn heads. More than enough to cause 107 missed calls. I wasn't just the estranged one anymore. I was the inconvenient legal owner of something they wanted. And if I knew my family, they'd show up smiling, pretending they'd missed me, that we were all just kids back then and I should let bygones be bygones. So I made a plan. I didn't answer their calls, but I called the estate attorney, confirmed everything, updated my address, verified the deed transfer. I booked a flight to the city where I was now somehow a property owner, and then I did something that startled even me. I went home, not to their home. I never had one there, but to Grandma's. The house was small, clean, and smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Her belongings were still intact, boxed neatly by the corners. Probably by them, before they realized they couldn't sell it without me. Her photos were all still there, except mine. Not a single one. Just Adam's graduation, Kelsey's prom, family barbecues I was never invited to. I recognized the backdrop of one from the road trip. The trip that ended without me. I stood in that living room for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, connected to the Wi-Fi and got to work. Changed the locks, filed a change of mailing address. I wasn't sure what I'd do with the house yet. Sell it, rent it, maybe move in for a while just to breathe untainted by obligation. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Mom. I answered. There was a pause, as if she couldn't quite believe I picked up. Ryan? She asked cautiously. I didn't reply. We didn't know you were coming back. We thought you were still angry. Still, as if anger had a shelf life. As if 15 years could dissolve betrayal into water under the bridge. I came to see the house, I said flatly. You could have told us, she replied, her voice rising slightly. We were planning to stop by this week. Talk things through. Maybe come to some kind of agreement. Agreement. There it was. It wasn't about Grandma. It wasn't about grief. It was about assets. I already spoke to the attorney, I said. Her voice sharpened. Ryan, don't be difficult. You're not the only grandchild. Adam and Kelsey didn't get left anything. I cut in, and I think we both know why. Silence. Then, just above a whisper, she said, "You can't seriously be planning to keep the house." "I can. And I am." Another beat of silence. "Then you owe us more than this." That was when the shift happened inside me. Because no matter how much time passed, no matter how many jobs I held or degrees I earned or friends I made, they would always see me as the placeholder, the background character, the one they could leave behind and still sleep soundly. "I owe you nothing," I said. Then I hung up. The next call came 20 minutes later. This time it was Adam. I didn't answer. Then Kelsey, then Mom again. I watched the missed calls rack up. 108, 109, 112. And then came the knock on the door. The knock wasn't aggressive. It was measured, like someone trying really hard to sound calm, controlled, normal. But I'd grown up in that chaos. I knew exactly what false cheer sounded like. I stood in the hallway just past the kitchen, staring at the front door like it was a relic from a different lifetime. A version of me, maybe the teenage Ryan they left at the gas station, might have run to it, might have opened it with a nervous smile, hoping they were sorry. But that Ryan was gone. I waited another knock or two before I stepped forward and opened it, just enough for the screen door to hold the line. Standing outside were all three of them. Adam in his usual smug business casual, sleeves rolled up like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. Kelsey, clutching her oversized purse and a Starbucks drink she hadn't finished. And my mom, who looked like she'd dressed up for a church she hadn't believed in for years. "Ryan," she said with a breathy smile, like we just bumped into each other at the grocery store. Adam chimed in, "There he is." I didn't say anything. "We just wanted to talk," Mom continued, glancing around the porch like she was worried the neighbors might hear. "Clear the air. You left so suddenly after everything." "You mean after you left me?" I said, still holding the screen door shut. Adam sighed, rubbing his temple like I was being exhausting. "Look, man, we were kids. It was a stupid joke. We were just messing around." "You were 19, I said. "And I wasn't in on the joke." Kelsey leaned in. "We said we were sorry." "No," I replied. "You said I was dramatic. That's not an apology." Her smile flickered. "So what? You're going to just cut us out of everything because of something that happened 15 years ago?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean like when you cut me out of every holiday, every birthday, every family update? Like that?" Mom's voice wavered. "We didn't know how to reach you. You had no problem finding me when Grandma's will came through." That hit. I saw it in her eyes, in the tight pinch of Adam's jaw, in the way Kelsey suddenly found the edge of her cup very interesting. "You know, Grandma would have wanted us to stick together," Mom said gently, softening her tone. "She always loved having us all under one roof. She left this house to me," I said plainly. That was her final word. Adam stepped forward, hand casually on the screen handle. "Come on, man. You don't even live here. You're not planning to stay, right? You could sign it over. We could sell it, split it, make it fair." Fair. I almost laughed. Fair. Like fairness had ever factored into anything they did. Like fairness was part of stranding your youngest sibling in the middle of Nebraska to teach him a lesson. "I think I'm going to hold on to it for now," I said. Kelsey groaned. "Are you serious? You haven't even been here in years. This isn't your home." I looked around the small porch. The wind chimes I remembered from my childhood visits still hung from the eave, faded and clinking softly. The rose bushes she'd planted were blooming pink and overgrown, wild in their beauty. I looked back at my sister and said, "Maybe not, but it's not yours either." Adam lost the pretense then. "You're making a mistake. If you do this, don't expect any of us to be there when you change your mind." "Noted," I said, and began to close the door. But my mom stopped it with her hand. "Ryan," she said. I was narrowing now. "Don't throw away your family over a house." I leaned against the frame. "You already threw me away. This is just the first time you've realized it might cost you something." She stared at me, her hand still pressed to the door frame, her nails perfectly manicured like always. Then, with a sharp breath, she stepped back. Adam turned without another word. Kelsey lingered like she wanted to say something clever, but couldn't find the right tone. I closed the door, locked it, and for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar wash over me. Power. They weren't in control anymore. They couldn't guilt me. They couldn't gaslight me into thinking I was too sensitive, too silent, too forgettable. I'd been silent, but I'd never forgotten. Later that evening, I walked through the house room by room. I found Grandma's old letters tied in string, her recipes in the drawer, a photo I didn't expect in the back of a worn album of me and her on that Christmas visit. Just the two of us, laughing over cocoa. She hadn't forgotten me either. That night, I made tea in her old kettle, sat in her chair by the window, and let the quiet settle. Then my phone buzzed again. A new number, a voicemail. When I played it, Adam's voice came through. You think you've won something? You don't even know what you're holding. You think Grandma left it to you out of love? Keep digging, little brother. You'll wish you never did. The message ended, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt something close to fear. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Grandma's old chair, the one with the cushion that had molded to her frame over years of crosswords and Sunday morning coffee, and listened to that voicemail on loop. You don't even know what you're holding. That line got under my skin. It wasn't just spite. There was something in Adam's voice. Tight, bitter, a little panicked. It didn't sound like a bluff. He was angry, yes, but also threatened, and that was new. Adam had never once looked at me as anything more than an underfoot inconvenience. Whatever Grandma left me, it wasn't just the house. The next morning, I pulled out the boxes they'd packed up and left in the corner of the living room, neatly labeled. Books, photos, kitchen, the usual. I dug through them carefully, opening every envelope, flipping through every notebook. It was halfway through a box marked linens, towels, old blankets, a pair of slippers still in their packaging, that I found something strange. It was a flat black notebook sandwiched between folded sheets. At first glance, it looked like a plain ledger. But when I flipped it open, the first page was addressed directly to me. Ryan, if you're reading this, then you came home, and I hope you're safe. I didn't tell them. I didn't tell anyone, but you were always the one who paid attention. That's why I'm leaving this to you. My hands tightened around the edge of the paper. The next few pages laid out something I never expected. Grandma had been quietly investing for decades. Stocks, real estate, some small startups before they took off. She'd never talked about it. Kept everything under the radar. She mentioned it once, apparently to my mom, who shrugged it off as old lady delusions. But she hadn't been delusional. Far from it. She was worth a lot. The house wasn't just a sentimental gift. It was the key to the entire portfolio. The deed came with full rights to several trust accounts, all linked through a shell company Grandma had set up in her early 60s. And the beneficiary of it all? Me. Not my mom, not Adam, not Kelsey. Just me. There were instructions, passcodes, a safety deposit box number, and a second key taped under the back cover of the notebook. I sat back in the chair and laughed. Once, soft and disbelieving. Not because I found it funny, but because it finally made sense. The desperation in their voices, the timing of the calls, the visit, the threats. They didn't want the house. They wanted everything tied to it. Later that week, I took a trip downtown to the bank listed in the notebook. The deposit box was real. Inside, I found original documents, stock certificates, a thumb drive, and a sealed envelope with my name on it in Grandma's careful, looping handwriting. I waited until I got back to the house to open it. My dear boy, I don't know where life took you, but if you're reading this, I trust you found your way. I always knew you would. I saw how they treated you, and it broke my heart. But I also knew someday they'd need you more than you needed them. I built this for you because I believed in you when no one else did. Do what you want with it. Build something, start fresh, or just breathe without them pulling at you. You've earned that. And remember, silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. Love always, Grandma. I cried. For the first time in years, I really cried. Not just for the years I'd lost, but for the simple, quiet truth that someone had seen me, had loved me without conditions or demands, and had trusted me enough to leave it all in my hands. The next day, I contacted the estate lawyer again. Not to sell, not to cash out, but to transfer everything carefully, smartly into a new trust. One under a different name, one that couldn't be traced back to the family unless I wanted it to be. I started moving pieces, setting up protections, making sure they couldn't touch a cent without going through me. And then I invited them back. It was a Saturday when they showed up. Same lineup. Mom, Adam, Kelsey. They looked tired, worn down. I could see the rehearsed apologies waiting in their throats. This time, I opened the door wide and motioned them inside. They stepped in like they belonged there, like they still thought there was a version of this where we all hugged and made up, and I handed over the keys. I didn't offer drinks. I didn't ask how they'd been. I sat across from them in Grandma's kitchen, notebook in front of me, and let the silence stretch long enough for them to sweat. Finally, Mom cleared her throat. "We're glad you called. There's been a lot losing her. Thinking about everything that's happened between us." I nodded. "It has." Adam leaned forward, folding his hands. "So, we heard some things about the trust, about the house, and we figured maybe we could come to some kind of agreement." Kelsey, always the opportunist, jumped in. "You've always been the smart one. No one's saying you don't deserve something. But it was Grandma. She loved all of us. She wouldn't want us divided." I looked at them, calm and steady. "She didn't leave anything to you," I said. Mom flinched. "She made a mistake." I shook my head. "No. She made a choice." Adam's tone turned hard. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I said. "I've always been better than how you treated me." Kelsey rolled her eyes. "So what? You're just going to cut us off over something that happened 15 years ago?" "I was 18, I replied. "You left me at a gas station and drove away laughing. I slept in a stranger's truck that night. I ate crackers for dinner. I could have vanished and none of you would have known for weeks. You abandoned me. That's not a prank. That's not a phase. That's the line you drew. I just finally decided to honor it." Mom's lip trembled. "Ryan, please." "No," I said firmly. "This is how it ends." I stood up, took the notebook and the envelope, and walked them to the door. "Whatever you thought you'd get from this house, let it go. It's done." Adam clenched his fists. "You'll regret this." I smiled. "No, you will. Because for once in your life you can't lie, manipulate, or guilt your way out of the truth. You're just going to have to live with it." I closed the door behind them, and this time no one knocked again. In the months that followed, I stayed in the house, fixed it up, started working from the home office I built in what used to be Grandma's sewing room. I started dating again, found peace in small things. Watering her roses, playing music on her old stereo, reading her cookbooks. And sometimes I'd find another note she left behind, tucked in a drawer, scrawled in the margins of a crossword, written in the back of a photo album. She'd planned this, all of it. She saw them for what they were, and she saw me for what I could become. I wasn't the forgotten one anymore. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Over dinner, I said, "Let me know the date for the reunion." My brother snapped, "You're not family. Don't show up." The table erupted in laughter. I just left. For days later, their loan payment failed. I sent, "Not family, not funded." 2 days later, there was a furious knock on my door. I got so angry I couldn't sleep for 3 nights. Not the kind of anger that fades after a good cry, but the kind that settles deep inside you and rewrites everything you thought you knew. That week, I finally understood what my grandmother had warned me about. She used to tell me, "You can't make cold people warm by giving them more of your fire." I never listened. I kept showing up, paying for things, trying to hold everyone together. I thought love was earned through effort. But sitting alone those nights, I realized all I'd been doing was funding people who wouldn't cross the street for me. 4 years, I'd been the family fixer, the dependable one. When my parents needed help with rent, I transferred money without hesitation. When Derek's business venture needed seed money, I gave him $15,000 for my savings. No paperwork, no pressure. When they planned vacations and forgot to invite me, I'd still send them money for gas or food. I thought that was what family did for each other. But the truth was, they didn't see me as family, just as a safety net. I'd been biting my tongue for months, holding back resentment every time my mother called Derek her miracle child, or when my father bragged about Derek's so-called company while ignoring my own promotion at work. Every time I brought up something that mattered to me, they changed the subject to Derek's latest problem. The breaking point came at that Sunday dinner. It was supposed to be a family night. I brought homemade lasagna, garlic bread, a bottle of good wine. My mom barely acknowledged it before saying Derek had brought real food, takeout wings, and cold fries. They laughed like it was a joke I should find funny. I tried to brush it off, told myself to keep the peace. But when the conversation shifted to the upcoming family reunion, I noticed something. Everyone was talking about flights, hotels, group chats, all of which I wasn't part of. So, I asked calmly, I thought, let me know the date for the reunion. I'll book my ticket early this time. Derek smirked without even looking up. You're not family. Don't show up. The table erupted in laughter. My father slapped his knee. My mother tried to hide a smile. I just stared at them, waiting for someone, anyone, to say it was too far. No one did. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and left. No scene, no shouting, just silence and a kind of clarity I'd never felt before. For days passed without a single text or call. Not one person from that table reached out. Not to check on me, not to apologize, nothing. Then Derek texted like nothing had happened. Hey, weird question. Did your bank maybe block the transfer? The loan payment didn't go through. I read it twice, then 3 times. My hands didn't shake. I just typed 4 words. Not family, not funded. And I blocked his number. For the first time in my life, it felt like peace. That peace didn't last long. The next morning, before sunrise, there was a furious knock at my door. It started as a few hard bangs, then escalated to full-on pounding over and over until the walls vibrated. I didn't even have to look. I knew who it was. The thing about changing is that the people who benefited from the old you always take it personally. And I was about to find out just how personal it could get. I didn't open the door. I let them bang on it like they owned the place, like they had the right to demand something from me. After everything, eventually the pounding stopped. I stood by the kitchen window, sipping my tea, watching the porch. 10 minutes later, a silver SUV pulled away from the curb. My dad's car. Then came the calls. First from my mom's phone, then my dad's. I ignored both. No voicemails, just missed calls piling up like they were trying to scare me into responding. An hour later, a new number. Then another. I stopped looking until one message caught my eye. This is serious. We need to talk. Who is Derek? Of course. A few minutes after that, a long text from his girlfriend, Carly. I'd met her twice. She sent this overly sweet paragraph about how Derek was under an incredible amount of pressure right now and how she hoped I could find it in my heart to be reasonable. Reasonable. It always comes back to that word when people can't manipulate you anymore. They want you to be reasonable, so you go back to being useful. That's what I'd been to them. Useful. I didn't respond. Instead, I packed an overnight bag and drove to my grandmother's house. She lived just outside of town in this quiet little place she called her retreat from the circus. The second she saw me at the door, she opened it without a word and just said, "Took you long enough." She had soup on the stove before I could even sit down. We didn't talk right away. She handed me a bowl and I ate like I hadn't eaten in days. When I finally told her what happened, the dinner, the laughter, the text, the door pounding, she didn't look shocked at all. She just said, "They've always taken you for granted. This is what people do when the well dries up." Then she said something else, something that stayed with me. The first time you say no to people who've lived off your yes, they act like you've changed. But really, you're just finally seeing things clearly. That night, I slept better than I had in a week. No calls, no guilt, just silence and soup. When I got home the next morning, there was an envelope on my doorstep. No name, no return address, just $400 in 20s, stuffed into a plain white envelope, a peace offering, a guilt payment. I didn't know. I didn't care. I left it sitting there all day, then slid it into the trash. Later that evening, my dad finally called again. I let it ring. He called 3 more times. On the 4th, I answered. I didn't say hello, just asked one word. Why? He jumped into this long, rambling explanation about Derek's business being in a tight spot. How the missed payment messed up some kind of supplier deal. Now there were late fees, a frozen account, and serious consequences. I didn't say a word, just listened. Then he said, Karen, it's not like we used you. You're taking this too personally. I hung up. That night, I pulled up my banking app and started going through every transaction from the last 2 years. Every time I bailed them out, every wire transfer, every food delivery ordered on my card, every emergency Venmo to Derek, even that $800 I gave my mom for a new washing machine that I found out later broke. It added up to just over $20,000. $20,000. I printed the statements, highlighted the transactions, and dropped them in a manila envelope. I mailed it to my parents' house with a sticky note on top that read, "This is who I've been. Ask yourself who you've been." Then I waited. For days of silence, and then, like magic, everything changed. Derek sent flowers, not even good ones. Gas station bouquet. My mom left a voicemail saying she missed me and hoped I was okay. My dad emailed a scanned photo of me at age 9 with a handwritten note attached. We're still a family, Karen. Now they remembered. Now they cared. But I had finally stopped hoping. Something inside me had closed. And for once, I wasn't interested in opening the door again. The shift came fast, too fast to be real. 1 week, I was being laughed at over dinner. The next, I was being treated like some long-lost missing piece of the family puzzle. They must have thought I'd be flattered, that I'd fall for it, that I was still desperate enough to come running the second they tossed me a little attention. It started with the flowers, not even good ones. A droopy grocery store bouquet left outside my door in the same kind of plastic sleeve they wrap rotisserie chickens in. No note, no explanation, just a weak gesture. Then the voicemails started. The first was my mom. She said she was worried about me, that things had gotten out of hand, and I should come over for lunch so we could talk. Her voice was light, like nothing serious had happened, like we just had a minor disagreement over dinner rolls. I didn't respond. The second voicemail came a day later and her tone had changed. She started talking about Derek, how stressed he was, how hard things had been for him lately, how maybe I should try to see things from his side. She used the word family 4 times in a minute. It sounded rehearsed. The third voicemail came that night just before midnight. He was crying. She said she didn't understand why I was acting this way. She asked if I still loved her. That one hurt a little. I still didn't call back. Then Derek made his move. He emailed me a spreadsheet titled Repayment Plan. It had no formal agreement, no signature, no dates, just a list of monthly amounts he apparently planned to start sending sometime next year. He added a note at the bottom that said, "Let's move past this. We're family, right? Family." The same word he weaponized against me at dinner like it was a gate I'd never get through. I didn't even reply. That Saturday, my mom texted me, "Come over for dinner. Just you. No drama, no pressure." I didn't go. By 8 p.m., Derek's texts started coming in. First, "You're being ridiculous." Then, "We were joking. You're taking everything way too seriously." And finally, "You think you're better than us now." There was the truth, the real voice behind the fake apologies, the resentment, the guilt they couldn't sit with, so they tried to throw it back at me. I screenshotted everything just in case. That night, I went through my drawer and pulled out old bank statements, payment confirmations, Venmo receipts, everything. I highlighted each transaction where I paid their bills, bailed out Derek, or sent money just to help. $20,000, give or take. Not that I expected it back, but I needed to see the number. I needed it to be real. The next morning, I got a letter. Actual mail in my dad's handwriting. He didn't start with, "I'm sorry." He started with, "We've done so much for you." He talked about how I'd always been taken care of, how Derek looked up to me, how every family has its rough patches, and how now wasn't the time to abandon each other. Then came the real reason. Derek's business is hanging on by a thread. If we can't find support soon, everything falls apart. There was the Ask, dressed up in guilt and nostalgia. At the end, he added, "We're having a gathering next month. Everyone wants you there. You belong with us." Suddenly, I belonged again. Suddenly, I was needed. They didn't want me back. They wanted the version of me that paid for their mistakes and smiled through it. That version didn't exist anymore. I didn't respond to the letter or the next voicemail or the random email from Carly a few days later saying she hoped we could all move forward and keep things positive. Positive. As if I just had a bad attitude and not an entire childhood of being sidelined and used. As if the laughter at that dinner table had been harmless. But here's the thing they didn't understand. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom, and I was just starting to enjoy it. By the third week, the tone changed again. But this time it wasn't sweet or apologetic. It was performative. They gave up pretending they were sorry and started pretending they were fine without me. Derek posted a slideshow of some backyard dinner. Everyone was there. My parents, my uncle and aunt, even cousins I hadn't heard from in years. My chair at the table, the one I'd sat in every holiday for as long as I could remember, was empty, perfectly visible in two separate photos. A not-so-subtle message. My mom commented, "Missing our girl tonight. Red heart." My dad liked every single comment except the one from me which just said, "Looks great." I was testing something, seeing if they still wanted the version of me that kept quiet and smiled through disrespect. Turns out they didn't want me back. Not really. They just wanted the optics of me, the convenience of me. But I wasn't staying quiet anymore. And I was done pretending that shared DNA meant shared values. That same week, I booked myself a trip to Asheville. Just me, a rental cabin in the mountains. No cell service. I hiked. I journaled. I slept in. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for an apology or permission to be at the table. I had my own table now, and peace tasted better than anything they ever served. I came back refreshed and calm until I got the voicemail. It was from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail like I always did. I wasn't in the mood for more emotional bait. But this wasn't from my family. It was from a law office. The message was polite but direct. They were calling regarding a personal business loan in Derek's name. $10,000. Apparently, Derek had defaulted and I had been listed as a cosigner. I froze. I never signed anything. I called them back immediately. The lawyer explained that I was listed as a secondary guarantor with a digital signature. They had copies of the paperwork. I asked to see it. My name was there. So was my forged signature. Derek had used my name this time legally, or at least he tried to make it look legal. The lawyer said I wouldn't be held responsible. The signature wouldn't hold up. But the fact that Derek had even done this made me feel like a fool all over again. Not just used, betrayed. I went to my bank, flagged all my accounts, closed the ones Derek had access to from years ago, ones I'd completely forgotten about. I changed every password, checked my credit report, locked it. Then I sat on my couch and realized something terrifying. If I hadn't blocked him, if I'd still been giving money like before, I never would have found out. He would have let me take the fall quietly while smiling to my face and calling me his generous sister. The next morning, I opened my front door and found another envelope. No cash this time, just a card from my mother. Inside she wrote, "We all make mistakes. Please don't punish us for loving you poorly." She'd included a photo. I was about 5, sitting in the backyard with Derek. Both of us holding popsicles, legs dirty from the sandbox. Smiling. On the back she wrote, "This is who you two were before money, before all of it. Please don't forget." But it wasn't about money. That was the problem. They still didn't get it. It was about years of being the second choice, of being used, dismissed, erased unless I was handing something over. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to a lawyer. I didn't sue. I didn't threaten to press charges. I just asked for one thing. A cease and desist letter. A formal notice that Derek was never to use my name, my signature, or my credit for anything again. I mailed one copy to him and one to my parents. No one replied. No one thanked me for not taking it further. No apology, just silence. Then a few days later, my grandmother called. She didn't know about the signature, not yet, but she had seen my mother. They had run into each other at the pharmacy. She told me something I didn't expect. Your mom's not herself. She looked tired. Really tired. She said she hasn't been sleeping. She said she misses you but doesn't know how to fix things. I didn't say anything, just listened. Then she added, your father's still angry. Not because of what happened, but because you didn't fold. He doesn't know how to handle a version of you he can't control. That hit me harder than I thought it would. They weren't angry because I'd hurt them. They were angry because I'd stopped letting them hurt me. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. That was the first moment I knew this wasn't just a boundary. This was a break. And I wasn't the one who broke it. They were the ones who thought I'd never walk away. But I had. And now they finally had something they never expected. Something to lose. The next letter came 2 weeks later. Thick, cream-colored envelope, hand-addressed, formal like a wedding invite. Inside was an invitation to the family reunion. Printed, embossed, with my name at the top like I was the guest of honor. They picked a resort 3 hours away with a lake and catered dinners and family bonding activities. There was even a schedule. Boat rides, campfires, a slideshow on the last night. I scanned through it all, feeling numb. At the bottom of the itinerary in bold print, attendance required for family meeting. Sunday 9 a.m. required. I laughed out loud. Along with the invite came another letter from my dad. This one neatly typed. He said things had escalated beyond what anyone wanted. That Derek was going through immense pressure, that mistakes had been made on both sides, and that this gathering was a chance to rebuild the family from the inside out. Then came the part that finally revealed the real reason they wanted me there. Your brother has made arrangements to propose a repayment solution in person. We believe a conversation would be better than legal threats. They still thought this was about money. They still thought I wanted something from them. I set the letter down and stared at it for a long time. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just done. But something strange happened the next evening. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up expecting another lawyer, another fake apology. It was Carly, Derek's girlfriend. Her voice was tight, like she wasn't sure if she should be calling me. She said they were no longer together, that she'd moved out. She didn't give many details, but she hinted that things had been bad for a while, that Derek had been spiraling, drinking more, picking fights, blaming everyone else. She said the business was finished. The office shut down. Creditors calling daily. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. He blames you. Says everything went downhill when you cut him off. But he's wrong. I think deep down he knows that. But your dad, he's worse. He's acting like it's your job to fix this. Like you owe them peace just because you're the only one who ever had it together. She paused like she wanted to say more, but ended it there. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. I didn't before, but I do now. You were the only adult in that family. I thanked her genuinely. It was the first time anyone had said that to me. The next morning, I got another call. This time, it was my mom. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. She didn't talk much. Not about the reunion, not about Derek, not about the letter. She just said she missed me. And then slowly she started crying. Not the performative kind, not the guilt trip kind. Just quietly crying on the phone. I'm sorry, Karen. For all of it. I don't know how to fix what we've done. I don't even know if I deserve to. But I miss my daughter and I love her more than I ever said out loud. That part broke me a little. I told her I forgave her. I meant it. But when she asked if I'd come to the reunion, I told her no. I wasn't coming. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I'd finally stopped needing to be in rooms where I wasn't respected. I'd spent too many years twisting myself into someone they'd finally value. That version of me didn't exist anymore. I forgave her, but I wasn't going back. Not for Derek. Not for my dad. Not even for the photo slideshows or the fake smiles. 3 days later, I sent them one final letter. No drama, no insults, just a list of everything I'd paid over the past 2 years. The $20,000 they never asked about, never acknowledged, never repaid. At the bottom, I wrote, "Consider the debt forgiven, but don't mistake that for an invitation." Then I closed the envelope, mailed it, and moved on. But I knew something they didn't. Part 6 was coming, and this time they'd be the ones needing help. The envelope must have hit harder than I expected. After I sent it, a list of every dollar I'd spent, every sacrifice I'd made, and a single line that said, "Consider the debt forgiven, but don't mistake that for an invitation." Everything stopped. No calls, no texts, not even one of my mom's half-hearted check-ins. Just silence. I should have felt relieved, maybe even victorious. But honestly, it felt like being underwater after a long storm. Everything around me was still, but you're left wondering what wreckage is floating just out of sight. Weeks passed. Life moved on. I got a raise at work. Took another solo trip. This time to Santa Fe. My apartment was quieter, cleaner, plumper. And for once, I wasn't walking around with my phone in my hand, waiting to hear someone else's drama before deciding how I'd feel that day. And then one Sunday morning just after sunrise, my grandmother called. She never called early. Never. I picked up before the second ring. She sounded tired. "It's your father. He collapsed yesterday. They admitted him to the hospital. Heart problems. Not looking great." I didn't say anything right away. Not out of shock. I'd expected this, just not yet. "Your mom and Derek are there," she continued. "Thought you should know. Not because you owe him anything. Just because I know you and I know you'll want the choice." And she was right. I did want the choice. I thanked her and told her I'd call back. But I didn't. Not that day. Later that evening, I got a call from my mom. First time in weeks. Her voice was thin, brittle, not angry, not manipulative. Just tired. She said, "He's scared. He won't admit it, but I can see it. They're talking surgery. He asked about you. Didn't say your name. Just asked if he knew." I asked if he'd apologized. She didn't answer. Instead, she sighed and said, "The medical bills are going to be a lot. I know we don't have any right to ask you, but..." I stopped her. "You already asked, and I already gave $20,000 and years of myself. I've given more than enough." There was silence on the other end. Then, finally, quietly, "You're right." She didn't argue. She didn't guilt me. She just let it hang there. I told her I forgave her again, that I still loved her in my own way, but I wouldn't be sending money and I wouldn't be coming to the hospital. She whispered, "Thank you," and hung up. But Derek wasn't done. Later that night, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. I didn't even need to listen to the whole thing to know who it was. He was furious. He accused me of turning my back on the family, that I was letting Dad die out of spite, that I was selfish, that I always thought I was above the rest of us. He said, Dad needed help with a very specific heart medication. Said if anything happened, it would be on me. No apology, no remorse, just blame packaged like urgency. And all I could think about was how fast he turned on me again. Even now, even after everything. The next morning, I wrote one final note. Not to Derek, not even to my mom. I addressed it to no one in particular and mailed it to the family house. Just a simple white card. It said, I made peace with all of it. That doesn't mean I'm coming back. Some doors stay closed because what's on the other side already burned down. I hope one day you understand that. I didn't sign it. They didn't respond. 2 weeks later, the reunion happened. I only knew because someone's cousin, someone who'd never cleaned up after Derek, posted pictures online. A cabin by the lake. A banner that said, family always. Plastic cups. Fold-out chairs. Derek was there, faking a smile. My mom looked like someone who was holding her breath the entire time. My dad wasn't in a single photo. I never found out what happened to him. Maybe he recovered. Maybe he didn't. No one told me. And I didn't ask because when you've been used, laughed at, erased, and dragged back only when convenient, the moment you finally stop opening the door, it's over. It doesn't matter how loud they knock after that. It's not revenge. It's peace. And peace means knowing I don't owe them anything anymore. Not my time, not my presence, not even my silence, just distance. Now on to the next story. Story 7. At brunch, my mom smirked and said, You're lucky we even include you. Pity goes a long way. My aunt sipped her mimosa and added, "Let him feel special." I just smiled, finished my coffee, and said nothing. That night, I contacted my lawyer, listed the family cabin for sale, and pulled my authorization from the shared credit pool. 2 weeks later, they woke up to notices, cancellations, and a group chat flooded with panic. Then my brother called, screaming. The moment I walked through the door, Jack laughed and said I looked like I just crawled out of a donation bin. My mom didn't even glance at me before commenting that I must have finally remembered what a razor was for. My aunt just smiled behind her mimosa like it was all part of the entertainment. They didn't invite me to brunch because they missed me. They invited me because they needed a target. The dining room was staged like a magazine spread. Fancy napkins, champagne flutes, some overpriced candle burning in the corner. I sat down at the empty spot, the only one without a name card. Jack raised his glass and said something about me finally earning a seat at the grown-ups table. I didn't react. I was used to it. I poured myself coffee and tuned out most of what they said. They gossiped about relatives I hadn't seen in years, about Jack's promotion, his new car, and how proud everyone was. I just nodded when appropriate and chewed my eggs. It was always like this. I showed up. I stayed quiet and I paid when they forgot their wallets. Then, right as I was reaching for the last piece of toast, my mom turned to me with that smirk I knew too well. "You're lucky we even include you. Pity goes a long way." My aunt sipped her drink and added, "Let him feel special." I didn't even blink. I finished my coffee, smiled, and said nothing. That night, I opened my laptop and didn't hesitate. I emailed my lawyer. I pulled the paperwork for the family cabin out of the fireproof box in my closet. The one they always called our little getaway. Except it wasn't ours. It was mine. My name on the deed, my credit that saved it when Dad almost lost it in 2009. They treated it like their summer escape, but I paid the taxes and the maintenance. They never even offered. Then I logged into our shared credit pool, the one I built with my excellent credit score so we could manage big family expenses. I was the anchor. I was the one they leaned on. I revoked every permission, pulled every link to my accounts, and canceled every autopay. I didn't tell anyone. I waited. 2 weeks later, the panic started. First, Jack noticed his card got declined while trying to pay for bottle service. Then, the family group chat lit up. Mom asking why her payment bounced for the utilities. Dad saying the cabin's insurance lapsed. Then came the cable, the lawn service, the cleaning lady, the vacation rental. They tried calling. I didn't answer. Jack finally got through. He went straight to yelling. Said I embarrassed him in front of his friends. Said I was ruining everything just because I couldn't take a joke. He told me to fix it. I hung up. Mom texted at midnight asking if I was okay. I didn't reply. I just sat there remembering the way they laughed that morning. How easily they turned me into the punchline. How they needed me to carry everything, but never once treated me like I mattered. I'd been their safety net for years. Now they'd find out what it's like without one. After Jack's little tantrum on the phone, everything went quiet. No calls, no texts, nothing. The group chat was dead. Not even one of those fake friendly memes my mom usually sends when she wants to paper over something awful. Just silence. I think they thought I'd cave, that I'd feel bad for overreacting, that I'd come crawling back with some apology about misinterpreting their jokes. That was their usual playbook. But this time I didn't bite. Instead, I took a drive up to the cabin. It was early in the morning, fog still clinging to the trees like cobwebs. I hadn't been there in over a year. Everything looked the same. Chipped porch railing, rust on the mailbox, the front steps sagging just a bit more than before. I stood in the middle of the living room and took it all in. The couch I bought, the photos I printed and hung, the firewood I chopped that nobody else ever bothered to replenish. It was my cabin in every way that counted. I called my lawyer that afternoon, told him I was ready to move forward with listing. Quietly, discreetly, and with my name only. He said it wouldn't take long. 2 days later, my dad showed up. He didn't text or call ahead, just knocked like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't spent the last 2 decades treating me like the background character in my own family. He held a six-pack and said he thought we should talk. I opened the door, looked him in the eye, and told him I was busy. Then I closed it. He stood out there for a few more seconds. Then he left. That night, I went deeper. I logged into every shared account they'd linked to me over the years. The phone plan Jack was on for 6 years without ever paying a dime, the family Netflix, the Spotify family account. All of it. Cancelled, removed, passwords replaced, locked it all down. They didn't even know half the stuff was under my name until it started vanishing. By Monday morning, the panic began. Mom texted first. Something vague about the Wi-Fi not working. Then she asked if I changed something. No question marks, just passive aggression wrapped in confusion. An hour later, she sent another one. Was this about what I said at brunch? I was joking. Don't be so sensitive. Then the crying emoji. Then a heart. Jack texted, too. Said I was being immature. That I was blowing things out of proportion. That we're family and family forgives. But forgiveness had always gone one way. That night, I finally responded. I told them I'd removed all my financial ties to the household. That I wasn't going to be their backup plan anymore. That if they needed something fixed, they could call someone else. I reminded them of the $4,000 they still owed me from last year. The money I gave them when Jack's insurance scam almost caught up with him. And they begged me not to let him get arrested. They promised it was temporary. A month, max. That was 16 months ago. I told them I wanted it back. For $1,000, no interest, no wiggle room, due at the end of the month. I gave them a deadline and nothing else. By the next morning, I had 6 missed calls from my mom, 2 from my dad, and 3 voicemails from Jack. He went from yelling to pleading in the span of 2 minutes. Said he couldn't hang out with his friends anymore because his cards weren't working. Said his girlfriend was pissed. Said this wasn't fair. None of it mattered. On Wednesday, I emailed them a spreadsheet. It had one line, outstanding balance for $1,000. Due July 31st. No extensions, no discussions, no exceptions. Mom called that night crying. Said she felt like I was tearing the family apart. Said they never meant to hurt me. Said they were just joking. That I was always so sensitive. I reminded her how Jack used to joke about me being adopted. How she used to joke that I should have been a lawyer so I could finally contribute something real. How Dad once said after a bad Thanksgiving that it was a shame all that therapy didn't make me less difficult to be around. None of them had ever apologized. But now that they needed something, now they were sorry. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just told her what I should have told them years ago. You don't get to treat me like an afterthought and still expect me to show up when things fall apart. Then I hung up. I don't think I've ever felt more clear in my life. By the end of the week, they realized I was serious. The shift in tone was immediate. Jack stopped yelling. My dad stopped pretending he didn't care. My mom started calling every day like we were best friends. All of a sudden, I was the most important person in the family again. It was pathetic. She called Tuesday morning and left a voicemail about how the washing machine broke. Said she didn't know how to schedule a repair without my help. Wednesday, it was the water bill. Apparently, they'd forgotten how to log into the account since I'd managed it for years. Thursday, she sent a photo of Jack standing next to his car with the hood open. Said something about how I always knew how to figure these things out. They didn't say sorry. They didn't offer to pay me back. They just wanted it all to go back to normal. That same evening, I got a message from my aunt, the same one who smirked during brunch like she was watching a live sitcom. She said the whole thing had gone too far, that I needed to think about what kind of man I wanted to be. Said I was hurting people who loved me. I almost laughed. They were all hurting now. And the truth was, it didn't even take much. Just a few logins, a few documents, a few digital scissors to cut every cord they had tied around my neck. I hadn't yelled, hadn't lashed out, hadn't burned anything down. I just stopped giving, and that was enough to unravel everything. I got the $4,000 on Friday, wired from my dad's account with a 2-word note. We're square. They thought that was the end of it. Like settling the debt would buy them a clean slate. Didn't. That same night, I submitted the final documents for the cabin listing. It was going on the market the following week. I didn't tell anyone. On Saturday, Jack tried again. He showed up at my place with 2 six-packs and some nonsense about brothers fixing things. Said he missed how things used to be. Said it was stupid that we were fighting over a couple of jokes. I let him sit there on the porch rambling until he realized I wasn't going to respond. Then he stood up, tried to make it about me again, called me bitter, dramatic, impossible to deal with. I closed the door while he was mid-sentence. Later that night, I got a final text from him. Said he hoped I enjoyed being alone, that the rest of the family was moving on without me. They weren't. I could see it in the way they kept circling. Mom dropping passive-aggressive messages about how we all make mistakes. Dad asking if I'd reconsider handling the property taxes just one last time. Jack trying to act like nothing ever happened when he needed a ride to pick up his car. I ignored all of it. The more they tried to pretend nothing had changed, the more obvious it was how much had. They needed me, not because they loved me, but because they had built their lives on the idea that I would always be there. Quiet, reliable, invisible. But I wasn't that person anymore, and they weren't ready for what was coming next. The listing went live on a Monday morning. I watched it happen from my kitchen table with a coffee in hand, barely blinking as the photo of the cabin appeared online. Wide porch, green shutters, maple trees all around it. The same place where I'd spent countless weekends cleaning, fixing, mowing, while everyone else just showed up with coolers and walked in like they owned it. It didn't take long for the storm to hit. By noon, my phone was vibrating nonstop. I didn't even have to look. I knew. My mom called 4 times before I silenced it. Then came the group chat. My aunt was the first to notice. She sent a screenshot of the listing and added, "What is this?" Like she hadn't sat there smirking when I got humiliated over pancakes. Then my mom chimed in with something about, "You can't be serious." Then a crying emoji. It wasn't until one of her old church friends messaged her, someone I barely even remembered, that she really lost it. Apparently, the woman saw the listing on Facebook and assumed my mom was downsizing. When she replied that she didn't know anything about it, the woman asked if everything was okay and whether they needed help. That's what sent her spiraling. The next voicemail she left me was almost unintelligible. Between crying and gasping, she said I was tearing the family apart, that I was acting like a stranger, that people were asking questions, and she didn't know what to say. I didn't reply. That night, my dad sent me a single text, "Call me." I didn't. Instead, I went to bed and slept better than I had in weeks. The next day, Jack went full meltdown. He blew up the group chat with screenshot after screenshot. The listing, the price, the agent's contact, a message from one of his friends asking if they could rent it for a guy's trip. He tagged me with 6 question marks, then sent another message a few hours later calling me a snake. Said I had no right. Said I was selfish, vindictive, and unstable. I blocked him. I blocked them all. Phone, email, socials cut. I knew what was coming next. The guilt campaign, the emotional blackmail, the "you've changed" speeches. And I was right. On Thursday, they showed up, both of them. Mom, Dad, and behind them, unexpectedly, Jack's girlfriend, Amanda. That stopped me. I opened the door slightly. Amanda stepped forward. She said she wasn't here for Jack, that she didn't even tell him she was coming, that she wanted to talk. Just me and her. She said she'd seen the listing and didn't believe it at first. Jack had always told her the cabin was his, that he'd taken it over after Dad retired, that he handled the expenses and taxes, that it was his family's legacy and he was keeping it alive. Then the week before, she was looking for a charger in his desk and found the original deed. My name, my payments, my signature. She confronted him and it all unraveled. Every lie, every exaggeration, every story he told to look like the golden sun. She said she was done with him. She just thought I deserved to know. Then she apologized and walked away. I looked at my parents. They just stood there unsure of what to say. I told them I'd already arranged the payout. They'd get their $20,000. Jack would get nothing. My dad tried to speak. Something about betrayal, about how things like this should be discussed as a family. I said it had been discussed for years. They just weren't listening. I closed the door. That night, I got the confirmation email. Offer accepted. Sale in process. Closing in 3 weeks. The cabin was gone just like that, and I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. The cabin officially sold on a Thursday morning. I watched the email come in while I was on a Zoom call at work. It was a short message from the title company confirming the transfer and deposit. That was it. Just a few lines of legalese and a number that hit my bank account 30 minutes later. It was strange how quiet the moment was considering what it represented. I closed the email, walked into the kitchen, made coffee, and sent a single wire transfer. $20,000, straight to my parents' joint account. I didn't include a message. I figured they'd figure it out. And if they didn't, even better. It only took an hour. My mom called first. I let it ring. Then came the second call, then a third. Then a string of messages, each one more unhinged than the last. She said I couldn't be serious. That the cabin wasn't just a property, it was part of the family. She said she was going to call the realtor directly. She said she was going to get her lawyer involved. There was no lawyer. At 4:32 p.m., my dad texted me, "We need to talk. You're making a mistake." I sent him a one-line reply, "The sale is complete. You've been paid." I knew the group chat would light up next. They always did damage control as a team. Sure enough, by dinner it was a mess. My aunt chimed in first, the same one who told me to let him feel special while sipping her mimosa like she was judging a wine contest. She said I was acting out, that this wasn't me, that I was better than this. Then Jack jumped in. He started with, "You can't be serious," and spiraled from there. Screenshots, messages from his friends, something about how they were planning a ski weekend next month. How now he looked like a liar. He said I ruined everything because I couldn't handle being the least successful person at brunch. I didn't say anything. I waited until the morning and then I dropped the final card. Cabin sold. Title transferred. Your share $20,000 has been paid. Don't contact me about it again. Also, effective immediately, I've permanently revoked my consent from the Family Credit Fund. The bank has been notified. Access is removed. You are not authorized to use my name or score for anything ever again. I sent it. I left the chat. I turned off my phone. What followed was exactly what I expected. Except for one part one didn't see coming. Jack didn't call that night or the next day. But on Sunday afternoon, someone buzzed at my door. It was Jack. And he looked like hell. Dark circles, wrinkled shirt, hands in his pockets like he didn't know what to do with them. He didn't yell, didn't act fake. He just said he was screwed. Said Amanda was gone. That he couldn't get approved for a new lease. That all the cool friends had stopped answering his messages. That he needed my help. Not wanted. Needed. He said we were still family, still brothers, that maybe we didn't always get along, but we had to look out for each other. I asked him where that idea was during all those years he let me clean up his messes. He didn't answer. I told him I wasn't here to clean up anymore. That he could either learn how to stand on his own or keep falling. That I didn't hate him, but I wasn't going to save him. Then I told him something he never heard before. You don't get to treat people like dirt and still expect their loyalty. He looked at me for a long second. Then he nodded just once and walked away. I watched him leave, and for the first time I didn't feel angry. Just done. The accounts were closed. The money was wired. The property was gone. Everything they used to keep me tangled was severed, and it was quiet, almost too quiet. It's been just over 3 months since I sold the cabin, closed the credit accounts, and cut the wires tethering me to people who only knew how to take. No one's called. No one's shown up, not even a forwarded meme from my aunt. And she used to send those like clockwork. Nothing. Absolute silence. And most days I love it. My apartment feels bigger now, cleaner, the air lighter. I stopped waking up with that low-level anxiety buzzing in my chest, wondering which emergency I'd have to fix that day. I picked up hobbies again, reading, cooking real food. I even took a solo trip to Colorado. No itinerary. Just drove through the mountains with the windows down and no one asking where I was or what I was doing. But freedom, I've learned, comes with echoes, not regrets. I wouldn't change a thing, but echoes of what could have been if they'd been different people. If I had a different kind of family, one that knew how to give, one that didn't turn love into a transaction. I kept the money, of course I did. Jack never reached out again for anything. My parents didn't send a thank you for the $20,000 I wired. Instead, I checked the account it went into. Yeah, I still had access when it landed. They logged in 10 minutes after the deposit cleared. Moved the money, changed the password. That was it, like it was a refund. A couple of weeks later, I got an email from Jack. No subject, just one line. You stopped and I finally felt it. I read it twice. Then I archived it. Not because I didn't believe him. Honestly, it was the first thing he'd said in years that sounded like it came from a real place. But because there was nothing else to say. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The funny part is I think he actually thought that was enough. That understanding the damage was the same thing as repairing it. But it's not. Knowing you ruined something doesn't make it whole again. I've been seeing Dylan, our younger cousin, more often now. He's only 16, but he's sharp, quiet, observant. He never laughed when Jack and my mom made me the joke. I noticed that even back then, he's not like the rest of them. Not yet, at least. So, I pick him up sometimes, take him to the batting cages or grab burgers. I don't talk about the family much. I don't need to. He knows. I'm not trying to save him. I'm just making sure he knows someone's on his side if he ever needs to walk away. 2. As for my parents, I don't think they'll reach out again. Not because they've let go of the grudge, but because they don't know how to deal with a version of me that doesn't need them anymore. They don't know how to reach someone they can't manipulate, guilt or shame. And now they never will. There are still nights where I stare at the ceiling and think about the day I walked into that brunch. About the look on Jack's face when I sat down. About my mom's smirk. About how they all thought I'd never fight back. They were so sure of it. That's what sticks with me the most. Not their cruelty, but their certainty that I would take it forever. And now that I've walked away, they're still waiting for me to come back, to cool off, to miss them enough to undo it all. But I won't. I've won. Not in a movie-ending way. Not with fanfare or revenge montages. Just control, silence, peace. It's not as loud as they think a win should be, but it's mine, and that's enough for now. It's been almost a year since that brunch. A year since I sold the cabin, since I wired the money, since I told them in no uncertain terms that they were done using me, and they stayed gone. Jack never emailed again. My parents didn't call. No birthday texts, no holiday cards. Not even a passive-aggressive Christmas forwarded message. First, it was eerie. Now it's routine. I still see Dylan sometimes. He's graduating this year. We grabbed burgers last week, and out of nowhere he said, "You know they still bring you up at every gathering, right?" I didn't ask what they said. I didn't want to know. He looked at me like he wanted to ask something else. Then just said, "I get it." That was enough. I live quieter now, more deliberately. I bought a small place 2 hours outside the city. It's not fancy, but it's mine. No shared accounts, no co-signed loans, no one holding anything over my head. Just space and clean air and peace I had to carve out by burning down a piece of my past. Last week, I found something weird, though. A postcard, no return address, just a photo of a lake at sunset. On the back, in small handwriting, "We should have done better. You deserve better." No name, no signature. It could have been from any of them or none of them. I put it in a drawer. Didn't throw it out. Didn't reply. Some doors don't close all at once. Some take years. But I'm not opening it yet. Now on to the next story. Story 8. I called Dad frivolous because he left us, and later I worked hard to support mother and sister. But after a conflict, they kicked me out, and now Dad wants to meet and tell me, I was 24 when my father left us. 1 minute everything seemed normal, at least as normal as it could be in our house. The next he was gone. No long explanations, no drawn-out arguments, just a quiet announcement at the dinner table that he was tired of it all and couldn't do it anymore. Then he left. It didn't make sense at the time. My dad was the glue that held us together, or so I thought. Sure, he worked long hours and seemed exhausted most of the time, but who wouldn't be? My mom didn't work, and my sister Kelly spent most of her time doing whatever Kelly felt like doing. I guess he thought I could step up and fill his shoes, but I didn't see it that way. I was furious. I called him reckless, irresponsible, every name I could think of at the time. I told him that real men don't just leave their families, no matter how hard things get. He didn't say much back, just that he was tired and couldn't take it anymore. And that was it. I never saw him again. For the next year, I worked 2 jobs, barely slept, and rarely saw my friends. I paid the bills, bought groceries, and even paid the vet bills for Kelly's dog. A little much she refused to take care of, but wouldn't let go of. I thought maybe my mom or sister would pitch in eventually, but they never did. Instead, they told me it was my responsibility. "You're a man and men provide," my mother said more than once. "Get used to it. This is what family life is all about." Kelly was no better. She lived her life as if nothing had changed, acting annoyed when I couldn't drop everything to help her with something. I kept pushing through, thinking things would get better eventually. But they didn't. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday, and I had just gotten home from my second shift, exhausted. I threw my dinner plate in the sink and went to my room. I figured I'd deal with it later, but Kelly wouldn't have it. "You can't even wash your own dishes?" she yelled, loud enough to wake the neighborhood. "You think just because you pay the bills, you don't have to clean up after yourself?" I snapped. I told her she was selfish and lazy, and that if she wanted to live in a clean house, she could start pulling her weight. Of course, my mom overheard, and she came storming in, taking Kelly's side as usual. "How dare you talk to your sister like that? You think you're so much better than us just because you work." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After all I'd done for them, they had the nerve to act like I was the problem. I told them exactly how I felt, that they were using me and didn't appreciate anything I did. That's when my mom said the words that cut deeper than anything else that night. "Maybe you should go after your father. We don't need you here. We'll be fine without you." "Fine," I thought. "Let's see how you do." I packed a bag and left that night. I checked into a cheap hotel, feeling like the weight of the world had finally crushed me. I didn't cry, but I couldn't sleep either. For hours, I just stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what had happened. I thought about my mom's words, the way Kelly stood there with her arms folded, smiling like she'd won. It didn't feel like a victory to me. It felt like I'd lost everything. In the morning, I realized I couldn't go back. Not after what they said. They didn't need me? Fine. But I sure as hell needed something or someone. My thoughts drifted to my father. I hadn't spoken to him since he left, but at that moment, I couldn't shake the idea of calling him. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was desperation, but I wanted to know if he'd take me in. If he managed to find a new life, maybe I could be a part of it too. I spent an hour staring at his number in my contacts. I hadn't deleted it, but I hadn't used it either. What would he think if I called him out of the blue after all the things I had said to him? Why should he even answer? But what did I have to lose? When he answered, his voice was different, calmer perhaps, almost as if he'd been expecting the call. "Dad, it's me," I said. There was a pause. "Then I was wondering if I'd ever hear from you." The conversation was awkward at first. I told him about everything. Working myself to death, the constant demands of Mom and Kelly, the fight that led to my leaving. I tried to keep it factual, but I could feel the anger slipping through. I told him how much it hurt to be used, to be treated like I was nothing but a paycheck. When I finished, there was another long silence. I thought maybe he was going to tell me that I'd made my bed and I had to lie in it. Instead, he sighed. "Why don't you come over?" he said. "We can really talk." I agreed. He gave me an address, his new place. It was only a few hours away. As soon as I hung up, I packed my things and checked out of the hotel. The drive felt surreal. A year ago, I would have sworn I'd never see him again. Now here I was, walking right up to his front door. When I arrived, the house wasn't what I'd expected. It was modest but nice, a place that looked like home. My father came out to greet me, looking a little older, a little grayer, but also healthier. With him was a woman I didn't recognize. She smiled warmly and introduced herself as Jessica, his wife. It was a lot to take in, but I kept it together. Inside, I told Dad everything again, this time in more detail. I didn't hold back. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and rubbed his temples, as if the weight of the world had just landed on him. "I thought this might happen," he said finally. That stopped me cold. What do you mean? He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen before: regret. I didn't leave because I was tired of life or because I didn't love you. I left because they used me too. Your mother, your sister, they never gave anything back, no matter how much I gave them. I thought maybe without me, they'd realize what they had. I guess they didn't. I sat there stunned. For years, I had told myself that my father was selfish, that he had abandoned us because he didn't care. Now he was telling me he left because he couldn't stand being used anymore. You were right about one thing, he said. A man shouldn't leave his family. But there's a difference between being a man and being a doormat. I didn't understand that then. Sounds like you're figuring it out now. I didn't know what to say. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone actually understood what I'd been through. I stayed at my dad's house that night. Jessica had made dinner, and it was the first home-cooked meal I'd had in what felt like forever. She was nothing like my mom. Warm, easy to talk to, genuinely interested in my life. It was strange to see my father with someone like her. For the longest time, I thought he wasn't capable of being that relaxed or happy. But here he was, laughing at Jessica's jokes and asking me if I wanted seconds. After dinner, we sat on the porch with a couple of beers. I was still reeling from everything he told me earlier. So, how long have you guys been married? I asked. A little over 6 months, he said. We met about a year after I left. Took me a while to feel like I deserved something like this. I nodded, taking it in. It was hard to imagine him starting over, but it was even harder to imagine him staying in the life he described. I didn't see it then, I said after a long pause. I thought you were just running away. But now. I trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. Now you get it, he said softly. I nodded again. We talked for hours that night. He told me more about what it had been like before he left, how he'd spent years trying to hold things together. He said he'd felt trapped, like no matter how much he gave, it was never enough. And when he finally reached his breaking point, leaving felt like the only way to save himself. Do you ever regret it? I asked. He took a long sip of his beer before answering. I regret not handling it differently, but staying? No. If I had stayed, I wouldn't be here now. I'd be a shell of what I should be. That hit me hard. For months, I'd been teetering on the edge, wondering if I was strong enough to keep going. Hearing him say that made me realize that I didn't have to. I wasn't a bad person to walk away. When I went to bed that night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, Jessica knocked on my door and asked if I wanted to join her for breakfast. Over pancakes and coffee, she told me about her work as a nurse and how she and Dad met. She was kind, funny, and everything I hadn't expected. After breakfast, Dad pulled me aside. You're welcome to stay as long as you need to, he said. This is your home too. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like I actually had a home. Over the next few weeks, I began to settle in. I got a job at a nearby warehouse, nothing fancy, but it gave me enough to start saving. Dad and I spent a lot of time talking, and for the first time I felt like I was getting to know him as a person, not just a guy who used to pay the bills. A few months went by, and one night after work, I got a text from my mom. It was the first time I'd heard from her since I'd left. I miss you, she wrote. We need you. I'm sorry for everything. I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond, to forgive her, to go back and try to make things right. But another part of me remembered all the nights I came home exhausted, only to be met with more demands. I showed Dad the note. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know yet, I said, and I didn't. I came home from work one Friday expecting the usual quiet evening, but when I pulled into the driveway, there was a car I didn't recognize parked outside. Inside, I found my mother standing in the living room. She was clutching her purse tightly, her eyes darting between my dad and Jessica, who both looked uncomfortable. Mom, I asked, confused and surprised. She turned to me, her face softening in a way that made me suspicious. I needed to see you, she said. You weren't answering my texts. Jessica got up and quietly left the room, but Dad stayed where he was, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. I have nothing to say to you, I said. I just want to apologize, she said quickly, her voice shaking. For the way we treated you, for pushing you away. We miss you. Please, can we just talk? I looked at Dad. He didn't say anything, but the look on his face told me it was my choice. Fine, I said. Talk. She started to explain, saying that she and Kelly were ashamed and wanted to make things right. She sounded sincere, but I couldn't tell if it was remorse or just desperation. When she finished, I said, I'll think about it. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and after a few awkward goodbyes, she left. Dad gave a low whistle after the door closed. That was something. Yeah, I said, staring at the door. Something about her visit didn't sit right with me, but I couldn't figure out what it was. The days after my mother's visit felt strange. Her apology played over and over in my head. I wanted to believe her, but something about it didn't feel right. If she really wanted to make things right, why now? Why show up out of the blue instead of waiting for me to respond to her texts? I hadn't told her I was coming back, but that didn't stop the messages from coming in. Thanks for hearing me out. Kelly would love to see you too. We really mean we sorry. I ignored them. I needed time to think. One night, I brought it up with Dad. Do you think she means it? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Maybe, he finally said. But just because someone is sorry doesn't mean they've changed. You have to find out if she's doing it for you or for herself. That stuck with me. Was this about repairing the damage they'd done? Or was she just trying to assuage her own guilt? A week later, I got another text, but this one was different. Please come over. We need to talk. It's important. I stared at the message for a long time. It didn't feel like another apology. Something about it made my stomach turn. When I showed it to Dad, he frowned. Sounds like there's more to this than she's letting on. What do you think I should do? He shrugged. That's up to you, but if you go, don't let her pull you back into the same patterns you worked hard to get out of. Don't lose that. I nodded, but I still wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore her, but another part, the curious part, was itching to find out what she meant. After a lot of back and forth in my head, I decided to go. Something about my mom's text was bothering me. If it was important enough to push so hard, I figured I should at least hear what she had to say. When I got to the house, it felt strange to be back. The place looked the same, but I didn't feel like I belonged there anymore. My mom greeted me at the door with an almost desperate smile, and Kelly was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Thanks for coming, my mom said as she led me inside. We're so glad you're here. I sat down, already nervous. What's this about? My mom looked at Kelly, who finally looked up. They exchanged a look, and then my mom took a deep breath. Kelly's been working so hard lately, she began, which was news to me. And she has her heart set on something big. She's been dreaming about getting a car, something reliable, you know? But we just don't have enough money saved up. I blinked, waiting for her to get to the point. We were hoping, she continued, her voice cautious, that maybe you could help out just a little. It would mean so much to them. I stared at her, stunned. You called me here to ask for money for a car? Kelly finally spoke up. It's not just a car, okay? It's my dream car. I've wanted it forever and I'm so close, but I can't afford it on my own. I felt my blood boil. You're kidding me, right? I worked my butt off for the two of you and you kicked me out when I had nothing left to give. Now you want me to help you buy a car? It's not like that, my mother said quickly. We've apologized. We're trying to make things right. This could be a new beginning for all of us. I stood up. No, a fresh start doesn't mean using me again. You haven't changed. You've just found a new way to ask for more. I'm done. I walked out, ignoring her protests, and drove straight back to my dad's house. When I told him what had happened, he just shook his head. I'm proud of you, he said. It's not easy to say no, especially to family, but you did the right thing. After the confrontation, the texts from my mom didn't stop, but they took on a different tone. This time there were no apologies, just guilt trips and passive-aggressive jabs. I thought families were supposed to help each other. Do you even care about your sister's happiness? Your father must have rubbed off on you. I see it now. I stopped reading them after a while. The bridge was burned, and I had no interest in rebuilding it. But then, one night, a message came in that made me stop. You don't know the whole story. Your father is not as innocent as you think. I showed it to Dad, expecting him to dismiss it, but instead he sighed. Maybe it's time I told you everything, he said. We sat down in the living room, and for the first time, he looked uncomfortable. There's a part of why I left that I haven't told you, he began. Your mother and I weren't just selfish. They were entitled. I know you saw that, but what you didn't see was how much worse it got behind the scenes. I leaned forward, not sure where this was going. Your mother never wanted to work, he said. She told me it wasn't her job. But what you don't know is that she blew through our savings. Everything I worked for. To pay for Kelly's whims. Clothes, trips, the dog, which she didn't even take care of. And when I said no, she'd gang up on me, make me feel like I was failing as a husband and father. I clenched my fists, remembering all the times I'd been pushed to the breaking point trying to support her. There's more, he said. When I left, I thought maybe it would force them to change, but instead, they became vindictive. Your mother tried to take me to court, saying I had abandoned her and Kelly, trying to bleed me dry with alimony and whatever else she could think of. She didn't win, but she left scars. I sat stunned. Why didn't you tell me this before? I didn't want you to hate her, he said. No matter what she's done, she's still your mother. But after what she did to you, I think you deserve to know the truth. Felt like a weight had been lifted. All the years I'd blamed Dad for leaving, all the anger I'd carried. It all started to make sense. What about Kelly? I asked. Dad shook his head. She's your mother's shadow. She learned everything from her. And unless she wakes up one day and sees the world differently, I don't think she'll ever change. I nodded, finally understanding what I had to do. The next day, I blocked my mother and sister's numbers. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Months went by, and I focused on building a life with my dad and Jessica, who treated me like one of her own. The warehouse job turned into a better position, and I started saving for things I really wanted. One afternoon, while Dad and I were working on his car, he turned to me. You've come a long way, you know that? You're not just surviving anymore. You're living. He was right. I wasn't just surviving. I was finally thriving. My mother and sister were still a shadow in the back of my mind, but I knew I'd made the right choice. I couldn't keep throwing myself at people who only took. As I wiped the grease off my hands, Dad patted me on the back. You're going to be okay, kid. For the first time in years, I believed him. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.